Welcome to this plenary meeting of the London Assembly, where we will be discussing Transport for London matters. Can I ask if there are any apologies for absence?
We have apologies, Chairman, from the Deputy Chair, Jeanette Arnold, OBEAM, from Andrew Dismore AM and Lenduvel AM.
Thank you very much. The Assembly has had a very busy January. We commented on the Government's draft domestic abuse bill, highlighting our campaign for a domestic abusers register. We questioned the Mayor on his draft consolidated budget for 2019-20. The Environment Committee published a report on aircraft noise and called for a halt to the expansion of Heathrow and London City airports. We put our comments on record about the 40 incidents of knife crime every day and the KPMG report analysing Crossrail's finances and the Brexit situation. We also summoned documents from TfL about the winding up of the Garden Bridge Trust. Declarations of interest. Can I ask you please to note the recommendation set out in item 2, and are there any additional declarations of interest? Right. Thank you very much. Would you please agree the minutes of the London Assembly Mayor's Question Time meeting held on the 17th of January to be signed by me as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you. We now move to today's main item of business, question and answer session with the Mayor in his capacity as Chair of Transport for London and Mike Brown, MVO, Commissioner of Transport for London, on issues relating to TfL. Welcome, gentlemen. There are 4 lead-off questions. There will not be a statement from the Mayor, and the first question is in the name of Assembly Member Eshalomi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question, Assembly Member Eshalomi. I'm incredibly proud of the improvements we've made to London's transport network. As promised, we've helped to make travel more affordable for millions of Londoners. When I became Mayor, Londoners were paying some of the highest public transport fares of any major city in the world. But by 2020, my fares freeze would have saved the average London household around £200. Since 2016, we've also managed to introduce the Hopper bus fare. We've got the night tube up and running, improved accessibility across the transport network, increased services on the Jubilee and Northern Line, invested record sums in new cycle routes, made great progress in modernising London's bus fleet with 7 new low-emission bus zones already rolled out, and introduced new signalling on the Circle, District, Metropolitan and Hammersmith and City lines, which once complete will bring improvements to 40% of the network. Very soon, we'll also be launching the new ultra-low emission zone, supported by a comprehensive bus retrofit to make the entire bus fleet Euro 6 compliant. In my manifesto, I stated that I wanted London to be a byword for cycling, and I'm pleased that levels of cycling are forecast to increase by approximately 40% by the end of TfL's most recent 5-year business plan. That's an average of 1.2 million journeys each day. Crucially, TfL has also met the challenge I set when I became Mayor to become a more efficient organisation. Efficiency savings exceeded £500 million per annum in 2017-18. This efficiency drive will continue as TfL identifies further savings by improving processes and making the best use of its property estate to generate revenue. My team and I are delivering on the promises made in my manifesto. We're making London's transport system much more modern and affordable. And in a city where so many are struggling with the cost of living, we're making a real difference to the lives of millions of Londoners, something we should all be immensely proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And given TfL's challenging...
Chair, on a point of order, if I may.
Yes.
Chair, it's about the question itself. The question is, given Transport for London's challenging finances, are you still on course to deliver your manifesto? The implication of that question is that the manifesto has been delivered. And yet we know that that's not the case. The part of the manifesto has definitely not been delivered. Specifically, it says that in the manifesto, it says the Mayor is going to freeze fares by making TfL a more efficient and profitable operation, not by cuts to spending on better services and more capacity. But given that the Mayor has actually cut capacity, he's scrapped 27 new trains on the Northern and Jubilee lines. He's scrapped the improvements to the work at Camden Town Station.
Yes. On
all those bases means that this question must be out of order.
Yes, thank you.
It must be out of order.
Thank you.
No, this is a point of order, because if we're going to ask questions, they've got to be based in reality. It's like saying, is the mayor still 6 foot?
Thank you,
It's not
Assembly Member Boff. I'm hard put to think that this is a question relating to standing orders, because no doubt the Mayor believes that the answer he's given was indeed in order. So it's simply a matter of opinion. And under those circumstances,
Chair, I would say it's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact that the Mayor has not delivered on his manifesto.
Nonetheless, I don't accept that as a point of order.
Okay.
Assembly Member Eshalomi.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, good morning. Given that TfL's challenges at the moment are quite difficult, and you've highlighted some of the key things you've achieved in your manifesto today, for which a number of residents in my 2 constituencies are very happy for. For example, the Hopper Fair, some of the top fares, changing points were in Southwark and Lambeth. The fare freeze, again, has made a big impact for a number of people. But there are some concerns that we are seeing. Part of the reason for this difficult and challenging finances is the delay to the Elizabeth line. Are you able to update us on the progress that Bombardier are making on that?
Well, thank you for your question and your comments. I'm going to bring in the Commissioner shortly, but it's worth just saying this, as far as I'm concerned, as the Mayor and the Chair of Transport for London, the quality and the quantity of information I now receive since the previous Chair left Crossrail Limited and we got a new team in is far, far superior.
That's good.
And I'll let the Commissioner answer your specific question about Bombardier and the concerns that there were articulated in the media previously.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. So, first of all, I would just echo what the Mayor said in terms of the information, the quality of the information, the direct interaction with the Crossrail team, now that we have a different chair, a deputy chair, and a chief executive in place, is really marked. I mean, there is quite a difference in the openness, continuing dialogue and information that I'm getting, and I know the Mayor is also getting, given those changes in personnel. It is encouraging that, as with the revised plan on the 14th of January, the Crossrail team started running a train in the tunnel under full speed, under the signalling system, both on the train and in the tunnel itself. Now, that is only one train. Those tests have gone well. There's been since then a second train added to the testing regime. The plan of the Crossrail team is to run 4 days of dynamic testing, as they call it, which is running trains under those full speed, real signalling conditions within the tunnel, and then add incrementally new trains as the system is tested and as any blips or challenges are ironed out. I should just say, just for the benefit of Assembly members more broadly, that there will inevitably be some software challenges. There are with any new system when they emerge, but actually so far I know, having talked to Mark Wilde, the Chief Executive, in the last couple of days, he's quite pleased with the progress to date, and there's been nothing hugely material so far that has meant that his confidence level has slipped from where we are so far. But it is early days, and I do want to emphasise that. But you know, so far those trains are on test, going quite well.
And that's good to hear. And again, Bombardier is the same company that's being used on the Gospel to Barking line, which you'll know. So on the one hand, we're hearing good reports on the Elizabeth line, which we definitely welcome. But my concern, and again, going back to the challenge in finances, is that Bombardier don't seem to be able to get a very small section which they're responsible for. You'll be aware that I've written to you and I've written to the Mayor about this, and I'll continue to raise concerns. So I know that TfL Rail are looking to scrap their rolling stock of 6 trains, and as an interim in trying to help address this issue, because I think the ongoing current delays is not acceptable, and I feel that TfL's response to it to date is inadequate. Would you consider maybe not scrapping this stock and actually using it on the Barking to Gospel Oak line until a full service is then maintained on that line?
Well, it's a very reasonable question, Chair, and if I may, through you, just address it. And by the way, I'm conscious that this is a matter of concern, not just for you, but also I know I've had a letter just yesterday from the Chair of the Transport Committee as well, which of course I'll be responding to equally. Unfortunately, those trains, those old trains that you describe on the TfL rail services, aren't compatible with the Barking Gospel Oak line. The reason for that is they've no in-cab CCTV cameras. There are no systems, therefore, that allow their safe operation on the Gospel Oak to Barking line. So that is a challenge. However, you will be aware that what we have been doing, working with Bombardier, is ensuring that some of the existing 378 trains that are running on other parts of the London Overground network, 3 of those actually, are being converted, being adjusted, so they are able to operate in an interim basis on the Gospel Oak to Barking line. These are higher capacity trains than the current old diesel trains on the Gospel Oak Barking line, and we have already had the first one operating in passenger service. So while that won't alleviate all the challenges in terms of the frequency of services on the Gospel Oak to Barking route, it will at least give some capacity relief to the passengers on that route, which is very important to me. And on the other side of it, I would just emphasise that both the Mayor and I continue to have at the highest level dialogue with Bombardier, and I don't mean just in their trains division, I mean with their group chairman in Montreal and their group chief executive, who I talked to only last week in detail about both the issues on software for the Gospel Oak to Barking 710 new trains, as well as for the issues to keep their eye on the ball on the Crossrail trains as they come in as well. It's also true that the Deputy Mayor visited Willesden Depot recently and just had a look and a conversation with the Bombardier personnel on the ground to make sure that she was also satisfied that they're doing everything they can. So we are continuing to have almost daily dialogue with Bombardier on this, and it's hugely important to me that we give confidence to the Barking to Gospel Oak passengers that there will be some clear timeline as to when they will get the new trains. In the meantime, the Mayor has pushed very hard Bombardier to ensure that passengers are looked after, and they have agreed with the timing to be worked out that they will subsidise some free travel arrangements for the passengers on that line of route, which I hope will at least give them some comfort that we are absolutely thinking of them at the centre of our thoughts in this whole process.
Thank you. The greatest comfort would be to have a full restored line, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Assembly Member Hall.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
It's quite fortuitous you're both here. Would you both like to apologise to all the people that have been stuck on the Metropolitan line this morning? I've had tweets from people saying there are people crying on trains. I've had a message that it's taken 2 hours and 20 minutes to get from Amersham to Green Park, which is normally a 52-minute run. It's an absolute disgrace. I keep complaining about the Metropolitan line, but this morning was a major failure. So would you like, Mr Mayor, to apologise for the failure?
Well, I'll let the Commissioner explain the reasons for the problem this morning.
Yeah, well,
I'm looking for an apology to all of those passengers.
Well, I'm always keen to make sure that TfL passengers receive the best service. Whenever there's any inconvenience, they should be apologised to. And of course, I apologise to any commuter, whether it's on bus, whether it's on tube, whether it's on the DLR, whether it's on London Overground, whether it's on our trams, with any quality of service they receive that's not good enough. What I think is more important, rather than a nice clip for a tweet, is for the Commissioner to respond to the real concerns passengers had this morning on the Metropolitan line. And I'm sure the Slim member wouldn't deprive those passengers from hearing from the Commissioner for the sake of a clip for a tweet.
I think actually, Mr Mayor, it would be nice for passengers to hear from you, actually saying sorry, which you seem totally incapable of doing. But I will listen to my... excuse me, I'm talking. I'm quite happy to hear from Mike Brown as to the reasons. I'm sure we're being told it's signalling again. I'm talking, do you mind?
That will do. Mr Mayor.
No, over to you now.
Of course, I'm sorry for anyone who's had any delay this morning, as I would be on any of our services at any time. The overall reliability of the tube, of course, has been maintained and indeed enhanced in the last few years, but it's against a challenging situation. You mentioned signalling. Of course, these lines, including the Metropolitan line, are in the process of having new signalling installed, as the Mayor referred to. This is ancient signalling. Some of it dates back to over 100 years on the Metropolitan line. That's remarkable in a modern 20th century world city, and I'm delighted that the rollout of that new signalling with our partner Thales, and indeed with Bombardier, whose trains the signalling will be applied to, is going well. This morning's issue actually wasn't to do with the signalling technically. This morning's issue was a very rare occurrence, increasingly rare occurrence that we have now, where a driver unfortunately moved his train through a red signal when it was at danger. And clearly when that happens, there is a huge safety process that passengers, quite rightly, and I know assembly members, including yourself, would expect that we have to follow to ensure that the integrity of the signalling system is checked by our engineering teams on the ground, as well as that the driver responds correctly in case there is any indication that he or she perhaps saw a green signal that was in fact at red, and there was some therefore discrepancy as to the reality of the situation on the ground with the system. So safety will always come first. Of course I would make no apology for that, but I would of course apologise for the consequence delay. This is a very rare occurrence. It wasn't to do with the signalling system this morning. It was to do with unfortunately a very rare incident where a driver proceeded through a red light, and you will understand the importance of dealing with that seriously.
I certainly do, but occurrences that people being kept waiting on the Metropolitan line is anything but rare. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the Commissioner, given that the Mayor has a very specific manifesto commitment to openness and transparency in his administration, can you therefore explain to me why in your written and verbal reports to last week's TfL board there was no update on the delays to the opening of the Northern Line extension, or indeed on the severe problems with the new trains and likely reduction in service on the Gospel Oak to Barking line?
Well, I think, thank you, Chair, if I may, through you. I think there is no question in my mind that over the last 3 or 4 years, the openness and transparency displayed by TfL is second to none, both within this country in terms of any organisation and probably around the world in terms of any transport authority. I think it is clear on the Northern Line extension that we announced at the end of December that the 2020 target opening date was under review. That is 2 years, of course, out from the opening date, so that is a fairly long
My question
window.
is, why weren't these current urgent issues mentioned in your written or in your verbal report at the board?
I think it's fair to say that there is, I've always been open, as indeed I've had with you, about the Northern Line issues. The challenge of the Northern Line goes back some time, and we're now working very effectively in partnership with the Battersea Power Station developer. I was down there just after Christmas.
The question is, why did you not report this to the board?
We've reported it 2 years out in public. We've announced, I think we could be more transparent than that, 2 years out, announcing that there are some reviews going on about the opening date, and that's for two fundamental reasons. One is that the changes in the design of the oversight development at Battersea Power Station adjusted. That required, in parallel, some significant changes to our station construct.
Commissioner, you're not answering my question. You're giving me the detail of that issue. But let me give another example. On the 9th of January, Public Health England published a significant report suggesting some pollutants at tube stations could be 30 times higher than beside busy roads. But again, you chose not to even give this a passing mention in your report to the TfL board. Why was that?
Well, I think the report that I give to the TfL board, and I know you were sitting in the TfL board, the board lasted somewhere in the order of 5 hours last week. It's a long board. The Commissioner's report is a summary of some of the issues that have happened in the previous time since the last board. It can't inevitably cover every single issue. I think there is a limit as to how many issues you can cover in the board. I've always sought to be very open and transparent about good news issues as well as less positive issues, and I think if you go back in the record of time since I've been giving those reports, they entirely do cover the whole range of things that TfL do. And of course, the level of scrutiny and questioning that the TfL board members give me is absolutely open to them asking me any question at all. There is no planned discussion with the Mayor or with I before those board meetings, which, as you know, are held in public under the full transparent and scrutiny that is appropriate, quite rightly so.
Okay, well, let's pick up
and I think it's fair to say that the quality and calibre of the board that the Mayor has appointed is actually second to none that I've seen in the history of TfL, and actually holds me and the executive team very much to account.
Okay, let me pick up another
given
issue then, Commissioner. Crossrail is absolutely the top priority for TfL, yet incredibly, the Chair and Chief Exec of Crossrail had to sit for 3 hours until their item actually came up. Why was Crossrail effectively buried down the agenda when actually you would rather have that up front being discussed with the board members challenging?
Well, I think it demonstrates the transparency and level of scrutiny that happens, because on the items before Crossrail, there was a huge amount of discussion and debate on all sorts of issues which demonstrated the absolute openness and transparency of which I and my executive team are subject to quite rightly. And I think if we had brushed over the Commissioner's report, we brushed over very important issues like the annual safety report, very important issues like the viewpoint staff survey issue, then quite rightly you would have come to me and said that there was an element of trying to hide away and bury some of the issues that were embedded in those reports. I was very pleased to get the feedback from board members, very pleased to get the discussion from board members on those very important topics.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I make no apology for the safety report, incidentally, being quite far up front of the agenda. Safety, I start every single meeting within my organisation with safety.
I'd like to ask Mr. Mayor, given that you have this new board that you're saying is dynamic, will you look to review it? Because it should be assumed they've read their papers,
Chair,
and they can then actually ask the challenging questions that you described.
Can I find it astonishing that the Assembly member used up all her time with these questions and didn't have enough time to ask the important questions that she should have asked and had the Mayor waiting for 6-7 minutes while she asked these questions to the Commissioner? I thought she'd raised them far sooner with me, and she's run out of time now.
Not really a matter for me.
It's
a matter for Assembly members to conduct their own questions. Anyway, Assembly Member Pigeon is out of time. Assembly Member Sahota.
My questions are on the future capital programmes. The TfL has recently categorised its capital project into critical, central, desirable and deprioritised. Will you publish a list of the projects so that we know which category, what fits into what?
Yeah, we will.
Yes, we've committed that we will publish those categories in front of the Budget and Performance Committee. When I appeared in front of them in January, I've committed that I will share that information. I'm very happy to do so. It is a new way that we've categorised projects, and I think it helps actually with the openness and transparency of our necessary decision making on these topics. So I'm very happy to do so.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. And it looks like that you're going to fund TfL capital project from the operating surplus from 2021 to 2022. Is this how you see capital projects being funded in the long term? And what other options are available to TfL?
Well, clearly, and the Mayor may wish to comment on this, one of the challenges and one of the ongoing discussions we have with government is the level of fiscal devolution that applies to London. London, amongst world cities, has actually the lowest level of fiscal devolution compared to any other world city. It's a very centralised, controlled economy that we operate in, and I know the Mayor is very keen, as am I, to ensure there is proper fiscal devolution. So, for example, the business rate supplements are actually used to be able to contribute to the capital spend going forward. It is true that we will end up with an operating surplus across TfL in the years that you communicate, and it is also worth just at this point putting on record the fact that if you exclude the operating subsidy that we had historically had from government to an average of £700 million a year, actually under the Mayor's leadership, the organisation is twice as efficient as it was in terms of cost than it was 4 years ago. And that's a really significant improvement, I think, that we've made. But clearly, the discussion with government has to be ongoing to ensure some of these critical strategic long-term projects are delivered.
Of course, Mr. Mayor, TfL says that they are going to be making a case to central government for funding important long-term schemes such as the Piccadilly line, maybe Crossrail, and also Bakerloo line extensions. What do you expect from the government to decide? So when do you expect the government to decide what projects they're going to be funding rather than helping out? And what else can the government give us more than just money? It's about a commitment of long-term funding of major projects.
Yeah, well, we're, as part of our submission to the government for the spending review, we'll be making a submission asking for more fiscal devolution, as the Commissioner has alluded to. If you look at the Crossrail 1, good example of using business rates to supplement and MSIL to help some of the cost of Croydon 1. Look at the Northern Line extension, quite an innovative way to fund some of that extension. So we'll be lobbying the government for more fiscal devolution, really, really important, but also clearly business rates, grants, and the surplus are also good avenues as well. But clearly, the government is promising a Brexit bounce, and it's promising huge sums of money to be invested across the country as austerity is now over, and we'll have this Brexit bounce. So clearly, London can expect to receive a huge boon when the government keeps its promise to have the bounce after Brexit.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to ask you about the low-emission bus zones. It's almost 2 years since the low-emission bus zone, the first one, was launched in Putney High Street, and it's made a huge difference to Putney High Street, although we're not quite within the EU limits. And I just wondered if you could set out, and perhaps the Commissioner can add something to this as well, how we're going to be building on that with a network of low-emission bus zones over the next year.
Well, it's worth, I'll bring the Commissioner to explain the timelines for the next phase, but of the 12 low-emission bus zones, I think 7 have begun. And we're already seeing evidence of a difference they're making in the quality of air in relation to the NOx, nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and the particulate matters that used to be, used to come from the diesel buses, but also other vehicles. We've seen huge improvements in Putney High Street, in your patch. Next year, some of us have seen improvements in Brixton High Street. And so we've rolled out more. We're ahead of schedule. I think the plan is to have all 12 rolled out by the end of this year, and I think the Commissioner will hopefully be able to confirm that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the plan. The Mayor is quite right. There are 7 that have rolled out already, and by 2020, the full 12 will have been implemented. I think it is worth saying that on those 12, on the 7 so far, the NOx emissions have reduced by an average of 90%, which is really quite significant. The first 2 low-emission bus zones, Putney High Street and Brixton, have had a major impact on pollution levels, with actually Putney High Street as an example exceeding legal limits for just 2 hours in 2018 compared to 807 hours over the same period in 2016. That's a reduction of over 99%. I have to say that exceeded our modelling and exceeded what we felt was going to be achieved. So I'm very excited to be reporting that we are on track to deliver the remaining 5 low-emission bus zones, and of course that is in parallel with the very important work to ensure the bus fleet overall is green and clean, with ensuring that we have all buses at least Euro 6 compliant across the whole fleet of London buses, and that work is also progressing very well.
So, I mean, as you can imagine, people in Putney are not excited, they're just absolutely delighted, because it means that they can go shopping and you can literally see that the air is clearer. But I just want to press you that, are we absolutely satisfied that the next 5 zones are definitely going to be in the absolutely right place? Because we clearly have these hotspots in a variety of places across London, and I just want to check that we definitely have got the data that shows that they are going to exactly the right place.
Well, I believe they are. I'm happy to write to the Assembly Member Chair to confirm that analysis and to share that analysis with you as to why we think they are the right ones, if that would be of help. But it is something that we continue to keep under review. And my ambition is that, of course, we don't stop here, that we keep going, we keep ensuring that in parallel with the ultra-low emission zone, the first of its type, of course, anywhere in the world, in parallel with that we keep exploring new technology, keep exploring and pushing the boundaries as to what we can do to clean up London's air wherever we can.
I mean, I think that's an important point, because I think the low-emission bus zones do need to be seen in conjunction with other initiatives like the ultra-low emission zone. I just wonder if you could say a bit more about how they fit together with the Healthy Streets agenda, because we do hear some people suggesting that some of the changes are contributing to pollution and contributing to congestion.
Well, I think the Healthy Street schemes clearly are part of the wider ambition to increase the number of people walking and cycling in London, up from the current 63% to 80% by the end of the Mayor's Transport Strategy timeline. And clearly it's an important there's lots of work going on together to ensure that while buses are able to move around in a clean and green way, that equally junctions are safe and pedestrian and cyclist friendly as well. I have to say, I think the work that the Mayor's Walking and Cycling Commissioner is doing in also working with us on the kind of work that we're doing on the bus fleet more broadly and on bus routes more broadly is hugely important. This doesn't feel like two different teams with two different objectives. It feels like a very much an holistic approach, but the Mayor may wish to comment a bit further. But I really do believe we're on the exciting cusp of doing something really, world-beating in terms of what we're doing with healthy streets and with bus air quality and cleanness of the air quality generally in London.
Well, I absolutely agree, and I think the figures of 90% and 99% reductions really speak for themselves. I did ask the Mayor only recently in the budget debate about whether we had any support from the government for clean air, from their clean air strategy. Is any movement at all on access to the Clean Air Fund? What about them supporting the diesel scrappage scheme for the micro businesses that you want to introduce as part of the rollout of the ultra-low emission zone? Any help from government on this at all?
I spoke last week to the Secretary of State for DEFRA, Michael Gove, and it was a promising conversation. I mean, I've got to say, whenever I speak to him or meet with him, I feel encouraged. And I've seen him next week at the Clean Air Summit that's been held with the Metro Mayors and core cities. And Michael Gove will be coming there, so I'll be pursuing this with him. As we speak, as of yet, there's been no constructive assistance to us, and the point I made to the Secretary of State was that I'm one of his biggest advocates for saying that I believe that he is committed to this agenda. And the point I said to him in a courteous way was I think it's important for him to demonstrate by walking the walk that he means it. And so I'm hoping there is some news here, but at the moment, no good news to report.
Well, that's a shame, Mr. Mayor, but I'm going to leave it there, and I'd like to wish you and the other Metro Mayors luck at next week's summit. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member McCartney.
Yes, I'm going to ask about bus services. Across your business plan period, there will be a reduction in bus services in inner London with the aim of increasing outer London bus services, but in total a reduction in kilometres. Are you running enough buses to accommodate the needs of Londoners?
We are. I'll let the Commissioner do the detail, but just to give you a context, in central London we've seen bus usage reduced by 12% in the recent past. The good news over the last year is the reduction in bus passengers usage is about 0.7%. Across the country it's 3-4%. So you're not seeing in London what you're seeing across the country, which is routes not simply being reduced, the frequency, but being stopped. We've still kept our promises around concessionary fares. And what we're doing in relation to the consultation is of the 675 routes we have across the city, we're consulting on 33. We're looking carefully at the responses to those consultation responses, hoping to report back quite shortly. We also are keen to increase the availability of buses in outer London. In outer London, there are a few alternatives. In central London, you've got rail, you've got walking, you've got cycling, and other options which are quite useful. That's one of the explanations for the reduction. But it's really important that in those parts of our city where there isn't good public transport, we get good public transport. The ambition is to get to 80% by 2041 of those either walking, cycling, or using public transport. And I'm confident we're doing that. And the Commissioner understands the brief he's been given, which is what we don't want to see is queues of buses in Kingsway, in London Bridge, in Park Lane, in Oxford Street. What I want to do is see those buses freed up to be used elsewhere across London.
So I think just to add to that, if I may, of course I recognise that the major growth opportunity is in outer London. It's in those boroughs where there's new housing developments, where there's important transport links to be provided, for example, with Whittington Hospital or wherever it is, to ensure there's proper connectivity for people going about their day-to-day lives. And I think the bus consultation generally, and I have discussions with boroughs on a regular basis, has been well received by boroughs and other interested parties. Of course, the outcome of that consultation is not yet being revealed, but I would assure Assembly members, and through you if I may, that we have taken it very seriously, and I have no doubt there will be some adjustments to our initial proposals as a result of the huge appetite to respond to the consultation that we've seen. But it's not, increasing bus routes is not, as the Mayor implies, about about just putting more buses on historic routes where there used to be a real imperative to do so. The dynamic has changed. People's use of buses, particularly in central London, has changed. The bus hopper, of course, makes a real contribution to how people use buses in London. The huge improvement in the tube and other transport networks around central London has also made a huge difference to how people travel around, as of course is the improvement in walking and cycling facilities provided in London. So the increases in the outer London bus network over a 5-year period, we have to be looking at carefully. We've got to look and see how much that costs. So some 40 million is the current plan as to what we would spend there. It is also worth, I think, just putting in context the fact that the subsidy that we pay for the bus network across London is of the order of over 700 million, which is the highest it's ever been. Now, it's quite right, because we have a social responsibility, of course, to ensure that every part of London is decently connected to the public transport network, and that is material in the Mayor's transport strategy as well. But it's equally important, and I'm sure Assembly members would agree, that we have to ensure that every pound we spend in subsidising the bus network is spent in the way that provides the most benefit to the most people and those communities who require bus services in particular. So that's what we seek to do. We'll continue to get input, I've no doubt, from yourself and from other Assembly members as we move this forward. But I'm very confident that the pathway we're on will make a material difference to both the operation of the bus network and to people who need it most.
One of the criticisms of Transport for London in the past has been it's often been very slow to react to changes in outer London about reconfiguration of hospitals, and as you've pointed out, lots of the growth areas are in outer London. Do you think you will have the capacity to actually react proactively and perhaps ahead of time rather than always being reactive in changes?
Well, I think that's a very fair question, and I think if I may, I sort of go back to my view of this consultation process. I think we have, quite understandably in the past, been criticised for not being on the front foot in terms of new developments as they emerge, of new opportunities for increasing ridership and ensuring that communities are properly served. I think this consultation is the first of a new approach to how we're doing this and how we're responding to local communities' concerns and interests being raised, but also just looking more strategically ahead to where those growth areas are. So in terms of the Mayor's work, often with us, in terms of delivering homes for London and new communities being served in London, of course it's the bus network that can provide that almost immediate response to those new growth areas by providing instant transport, whereas of course if you're planning a rail scheme, for example, somewhere like the extension to Barking Riverside of the overground network, that inevitably takes a little bit of time, and there's a little bit of lag between new homes and new jobs being created and a permanent link that a rail line can sometimes provide as well.
Thank you. If I could move on now to rail devolution, and having sat on a train this morning on the Great Northern Line into Moorgate for 30 minutes without a driver being available, I want to ask really if we have an update about the devolution of that service. So last May, Chris Grayling said that he was going to separate the franchise out from Thameslink, and he was in discussions with the Mayor's office. How have those discussions proceeded?
Well, I mean, I'll let the Commissioner give you the running commentary, but the Secretary of State did sound quite optimistic in relation to, I think it was the Gibbs review, and in relation to talking to us about that devolution. We have been pursuing, every time I see Chris Grayling, I chase this point up, and when I met, in fact, the Chief Executive of Network Rail, we also pursued this with him. I think we are concerned about if we don't get the information we need, it could lead to a delay in our ability to do that. So, Mark, do you want to give an update?
Yes. It's up in 2021.
It is. So the Mayor is quite right. I was in the same meeting when the Secretary of State committed to working with us to ensure that we had the information necessary to proceed with that potential for devolution of the Great Northern routes into Moorgate. I have to say it has been like pulling teeth to try and get proper discussion and proper information with the Department for Transport. I raised it with the Permanent Secretary, and we continue to try and get. There was a meeting with officials again a couple of weeks ago to try and get more information flowing. It still seems to be incredibly difficult to get that information flowing, but I am seeing the Permanent Secretary again this week, and I will, as a side conversation, ask her again to honour the commitment that the Secretary of State made to the Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I write on a regular basis.
Assembly Member Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. With a large number of commuters, I too was stuck at 8:30 this morning at Arundel Station. I have personally made representation to both of you, and you both have kindly not only explained the reason for the signal's failure, but also apologized for the failure itself. So I want to leave it at that. What I want to move on to swiftly now is question which is about the agency staff. Mr. Mayor, in your manifesto, you pledged that you would have 383 million cost of consultants and agency staff of let me start again. In your manifesto pledge, you stated that you would halve the 300 million cost of consultants and agency staff to 191.5 million. As of June 2018, you had cut 176 million from the agency staff budget. So has this welcome and significant reduction had any effect on TfL's ability to deliver its services, which is critical?
No, I hope not. I think it's important for the Commissioner to give you that reassurance. I accept there is sometimes the need for non-permanent labour, agency staff. Sure. It can sometimes be good for a specific project to have them in. In fact, here in City Hall, we often use non-permanent labour for bespoke pieces of work. So the task I gave the Commissioner was, look, I'm unhappy with our overuse of them before I became Mayor. I think we should be invested in permanent staff to give them the skills. We retain talent and we see them progress as well, rather than paying somebody who comes and goes, but also paying agency staff for a long period of time when they clearly should be permanent staff. We've reduced it hugely. We also now have processes in place to avoid a department overusing agency staff. I'm reassured that we're making progress, but it's for the Commissioner to confirm to you that there's been no reduction in the quality of service that TfL can provide.
Thank you for the question, and the answer is no, there hasn't been, and I wouldn't allow there to be. So I think the Mayor is quite right that it does give a really great opportunity to develop our own talent and our own people within the organisation. As recently as today, one of the national newspapers was reporting that we are on track to with a campaign to recruit 130 new apprentices for the organisation, across the organisation. It's that kind of young talent, and by the way, I have absolutely made a stipulation that intake of apprentices will totally and absolutely represent the diversity of London's population in its entirety. We still have, particularly in engineering fields, have too few women coming into our organisation workforce. Where we do have young talented women, we're making a massive difference to the delivery within the individual areas where there is proper representation. So this is a real quest to continue to transform this over time. As the Mayor said, there will be some specialist positions where, I don't know, I mean, we talked about signalling earlier on, where you have a very specialist signalling resource that you need for a defined period of time. And in those cases, it may be appropriate to have an agency member of staff for a short period of time. But that has to be the exception rather than the rule. And I'm very confident that the controls that I put in place to ensure senior sign-off within the organisation will apply those controls properly.
That is extremely reassuring for Londoners who expect and demand good quality of services from TfL. Moving on to consultants, in 2015 and 16, the consultants' bill was 117 million. And then in 2016-17, it went down to 107 million. Can you update me on recent progress you made on the consultant cost side of things? Because we haven't got the latest figures.
Well, I can share that with you. I don't have that immediately to hand, but yeah. I mean, it may be somewhere in the bars of my pack. I don't have it immediately to hand, but I can certainly share that with you. Suffice to say, we're continuing to make progress on this, because in an organisation that is quite rightly bearing down on costs and duplication and ensuring that we only do things in one part of the organisation, where historically, prior to the Mayor being elected, we did it in multiple parts of the organisation. It's part of the overall journey there, but I'm very happy to share the specific details, Chair, after the meeting.
Thank you. Very last question, very quickly. Number of TfL staff with a total remuneration of 100k or more was 402 in 15-16, went up to 515 in 16-17 and went up again to 564 in 17-18. How do you justify this 40% increase? Do you have any plans to bring down the numbers in the cost? And do you have any target figures?
I don't recognise those figures. What I do know is I've been quite clear to the Commissioner that we've got to freeze the salaries of the top team, and that's happened. I've also been quite clear we're going to reduce the numbers of staff with a base salary of more than 100k. The numbers I have is that's gone down, but also the number of senior managers I've asked to be reduced as well, and the numbers I have as well is those have gone down. I'm not sure if your numbers include the Crossrail Limited team. We aren't responsible for their remuneration package. In fact, even though we've objected to them, the previous chair still chose to increase their package. So I'm happy to look at your figures. I'm not sure if the Commissioner can...
Well, perhaps I could help a little bit with the figures.
Chair, I haven't got time. What I'll say to be helpful, I have these figures from the annual report and statement of accounts 2016 and 17. So that's very clear. If you can again drop us a line to actually give clarity on the figures from what I have stated against what you might have to justify. And I'm sure it's not Crossrail figures
absolutely.
which...
7% lower than 2015-16, and the number of senior managers in the organisation is reduced by 13%. And also, as the Mayor rightly said, there has been a total freeze on pay increases for the senior management team across the organisation. So the figures aren't the correct ones, but I will give you the
Please, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Assembly Member Desai.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, Commissioner. I have two sets of questions, particularly to you, Mr. Mayor, but Commissioner, you might wish to come in. My first question is about crime on the transport network. So the latest crime statistics bulletin shows an, quote, upward trend in violence, serious public order offences on the tube, DLR and underground. So on the 18th of January, through the media, I was told that violent crime on the London Underground has risen by more than 43% in the past 3 years. Now, let's put these figures into context. This rise is not good news, but it should be noted that this still only means there is a 1 in 500,000 chance of being a victim of violent crime on the tube, so it is still unlikely. But obviously that's not of consolation to people who have been the subject of crime on the tube. So, Mr. Mayor, what are you going to say about this worrying trend? And more importantly, what steps are the police taking to reverse this upward trend?
Well, firstly, you're right. I mean, if you're the victim of crime, it's no consolation to you that crime is also going up across England and Wales. It's no consolation to you that crime is also going up across the national realm, because obviously you're a victim. And so there's a number of things that we are doing. TfL contributes a large sum of money to the Met Police Service, to British Transport Police and to the City of London Police to help keep the transport network as safe as we possibly can. We've also encouraged more commuters to report crimes in the past they may not have reported. So reported to stop it is just one example of one of the campaigns we have to encourage people to report crime. I'm very encouraged, for example, by the fact that more women and girls are now reporting some of the unwarranted sexual attention, often crimes, that they're the victims of as a consequence of our campaigns. I'm not explaining the increase just by more confidence amongst commuters, but some of the things that Mike speaks regularly with BDP, MPS and the City of London about is high visibility policing. The night tube, the night overground has seen a large number of police presence as well. But I'll let the Commissioner give details of other things we're doing.
Yes, so obviously I would just echo what the Mayor said, that obviously any crime committed on the public transport network is one too many, and I absolutely acknowledge the effect it has on the victims of those crimes, and it's why it's really important that we do encourage people to report even what might be seen as low order crimes, pickpocketing, theft of mobile phones, some of the issues that unfortunately do happen on the transport network. But again, you were quite right to use the figures about the overall risk of crime on the networks as being very, very low. However, the Mayor is quite right to say that the encouragement of reporting crime, particularly Project Guardian, which is the reporting of sexual offences on the tube and bus network, has been a very effective means of highlighting this previously hugely underreported and very serious crime that was committed that simply wasn't getting properly addressed previously. And I've had some good, very positive discussions both with Sadiq, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, with Paul Crowther, the Chief Constable of the British Transport Police, and colleagues also speaking with the City of London Police on those very issues. So we'll continue with that dialogue. We continue, of course, to fund the Metropolitan Police Enforcement Unit and the British Transport Police for their forces in London on the underground and the overground network, and we'll continue with that commitment. It's very important to me that we work with them on strategies for deployment, and as the Mayor said, the most important thing we can do is have proper visible policing and follow up when crimes are reported so that we bring people to justice.
Thank you. I mean, both of you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, you talked about quite rightly the work that BTP do with City of London Police and the Met. TfL provides almost 1/4 of BTP's funding.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, what I want to ask is, how do you, more specifically, given your many other commitments, your Deputy Mayor, work with the BTP to ensure that this money is spent in the best possible way for Londoners, that we are getting value for money? Presumably there are regular meetings, there are performance indicators, and so on. Just can you give us an idea?
Yeah,
if you can,
correct. So Mike's team meet regularly with both the Chief Constable of BTP. Just to remind you, BTP is responsible for the national roll network, but clearly has a locus in London as well. You'll know the phenomenon of county lines. Often these young children are using a transport network to go around the country. So the NCA is also working closely with the police service, including the BTP, to make sure there's some coordination taking place there. In addition to the regular meetings the Commissioner and his team have with the Chief Constable of BTP, he came along to a meeting with the transport trade union representatives to also talk to them about some of the steps they're taking. You'll be aware, because I know you've raised this with me outside of the Assembly, the concerns you've got around staff being assaulted as well. And so BTP also look into those issues as well. Worth reminding you that the Met Police Service, City of London Police also assist the BTP in the work that they do. I've been impressed, and I didn't realise this before I became the Mayor, in the amount of coordination there is between those three police forces, which is encouraging for Londoners.
I must say, and this was quite some time ago, but nearly 2 years ago, but when I went to Palestra House, I was very impressed with some of the systems in place. And also, if I move to my next question, your manifesto commitment, you did talk about tackling violence against women and girls on public transport. So I'm glad that there has been a welcome increase in reporting. If people don't report, then obviously you can't do much. So you are delivering on that particular commitment, and I commend you for that. My next question is about the Safer Junctions program. So in 2017, Mr. Mayor, you said, quote, Transport for London will publish the first annual progress report for the Safer Junctions program in spring 2018. This is some 6 months ago. TfL told me that this has not happened due to, quote, a new system to capture collision data, unquote, that has been used by the Met since November 2016 and has, quote, resulted in an increase in the number of collisions being classified as serious rather than slight. So when will you have resolved this issue, Mr. Mayor, and be able to publish a progress report? Or, Commissioner, if you want to come in.
Yeah, you're quite right. This is a difference in the classification of the way the Metropolitan line is reported incidents and how they have given us the data. That is still being worked through, so I haven't got an actual date when that will be resolved. I would just, though, give you an assurance, because the most important issue is it is not stopping us dealing with safer junctions. So the amount of work we're doing to improve safety on junctions, even those junctions where we haven't got a permanent fix in place, we are taking immediate mitigation measures to ensure that we put in place some initial more safe measures at the junctions concerned that we believe are the highest risk of incidents or accidents occurring. So although we are still waiting for the clarification from the Metropolitan Police as to when we will have that accurate data, it hasn't stopped us in the delivery that we're continuing to provide.
I'm not really said, but TfL has been able to offer some initial observations on the number of collisions. Overall, there's been a 25% collision saving across all locations, from 403 to 302. I can give you one of the examples. 55% reduction in collisions at Elephant and Castle Northern Roundabout, 57% reduction at St. George's Circus. So, Commissioner, do you expect similar such reductions to continue across other junctions that TfL is making safer?
Well, yes, I do. And Chair, through you, if I may say, the whole approach to Vision Zero and to ensuring that we are properly taking cognizant of every single issue that happens on our road network is continuing to evolve hugely. So the Mayor and I, under the Mayor's leadership, hosted a session last week with some relatives and some survivors of some issues on London's road network. I think we both found it an incredibly powerful and moving discussion. I was delighted that people felt able to contribute to inputting what junction improvements might be needed on places where they had suffered or unfortunately where they had ended up being bereaved as a result of an incident. And the whole issue of personalising statistics, I think, is hugely important for me. These are real human beings with real lives and real families who are affected by death or serious injury on our road network. So I was very pleased to see that the number of fatalities had fallen last year, but over 4,000 incidents of death and serious injuries on London's road network is still far too high. We are aiming for zero. We will continue to make progress on that account, and I think the effort that we have to put into both safer junctions, to ensuring that the direct vision standard, for example, is fully implemented, that we've recently had sign-off from the European Commission on, I'm delighted to say. All of the work that we're doing is so important to ensure that we continue to ensure cyclists and pedestrians are safe as they move around our city streets. So we continue with that approach across all junctions where we think there is a risk.
I'll finish on this note. I mean, I've often been critical, as have many other members, sometimes of the way the TfL correspondence and dealing with stakeholders and so on. But I must say that over the last year, particularly I've raised three issues around junctions, Myland in particular, Myland Junction of the Mullen Station, which is one of the worst spot in Tower Hamlets in terms of recorded collisions, fatalities and so on, Bow Road further east, and outside Stepney Green Tube Station. And the response of the officers, some of the junior officers has been really good.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
So, Member McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just returning briefly to your exchange with Joanne regarding buses in and outer London, something I've been banging on for some considerable time. Speaking for example, Sutton, and just for once I won't mention the tram, or I just did, but they are particularly poorly served by public transport. And I think Joanne probably hit the nail on the head, which is looking at increasing services in outer London, which in a zero-sum game is naturally going to lead to potential reductions elsewhere. So really what I want to hear from you, Mr. Mayor, is will you commit by the end of your term to net increase bus services in outer London?
Well, Chair, can I give that commitment that year on year there'll be an increase in bus mileage in outer London, and that's set out in the business plan we published recently. It's very important to be savvy in relation to where the additional bus mileage goes. So, for example, there could be new housing developments, there could be particular need to get from a hospital to a town centre, or to a hospital to a new housing development. And so not necessarily the same amount of bus mileage, kilometerage reduction in central London is going to be transferred in the same numbers to out London, but there's going to be an increase year on year. It's really important because Sutton is a good example of a borough that is traditionally been poorly served by public transport. You'll appreciate the dearth of tube stations, for example. I can see laughing coming from my left because she knows how few there are, which is zero. Yeah. But it's really important we have alternative forms of public transport there.
And it is the over-dependence of outer London on buses, which has been brought up by Assembly Member Shah as well, and you need to recognise that and to deliver that, and partly related to the housing developments that will naturally be delivered in outer London disproportionately.
Absolutely, but we can't on the one hand say to people we want you to use your car less, particularly in outer London, when there's no alternative. One way to provide an alternative is public transport that's affordable, and buses is the obvious answer for the reason the Commission said you can do it almost overnight, subject to consultation, and that's what we're keen to do to accelerate new services. It shouldn't take so long, as was said by Senator McCartney. It takes too long, and we're trying to speed that up.
Yeah, and I think just to give you some reassurance, particularly on Sutton, so it is one of two areas, the other one being Ealing, where we are embarking on a demand responsive trial as well, to see if we can assess whether or not and where there might be the potential for more permanent bus routes to be applied. So that's a great example. Croydon town centre is another example, obviously quite close to that, the same part of the capital, where we've seen an increase in bus usage of 9% in Croydon. So clearly that's an area as well where you'd want to see the bus service being enhanced accordingly. And as I said in response to the earlier questions, so those are just two examples where we are really striving to do the right thing by increasing bus capacity in areas where there is clearly latent demand.
I'm particularly pleased. Lastly, I'm particularly pleased about extending a bus route to Tollers Lane, Council Estate, and potential to extend the bus route to Epsom, which is just outside border, but used by Sutton residents, and they're two particular ones. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Assembly Member Twycross.
Thank you, Chair. TfL's latest Travel in London report says that most cycling in London is undertaken by people who cycle regularly, and the majority of the population do not do this. People who cycle currently are more likely to be white, male, and earning more than £20,000 a year. How will your new plan encourage non-cyclists, and unfortunately I count myself among this, to give cycling a try?
Well, one of the reasons why we launched a new cycling action plan was because, having listened to some of the Londoners you referred to, it was a gobbledygook to many of them about cycle superhighways, quiet ways, mini Hollands. The infrastructure wasn't as safe as it could be, but it was very confusing. And secondly, people lack the confidence to get on a bike. And so we're doing a number of things. We're making sure that there's better quality assurance in relation to the cycleways, whatever they were called in the past, make sure they're of good quality. So a quiet way should be what it says on the tin. So improve the infrastructure. You'll have seen the increased investment, record sums in improving cycling infrastructure. And that does mean that I can confirm to the Assembly we will not be taking the advice of some to remove the cycleway and the embankment. I think it's a really important cycleway that was brought in by the previous mayor, and it's led to huge numbers using the embankment on the bike that they weren't in the past. I think 38% increase. But also it means working with communities. We've got a grant system now, community grants, and I think it's the activation programme. And I've seen some of the evidence of some of the fantastic work taking place with encouraging people who previously hadn't got on a bike to get on a bike, and the Commissioner I know has been impressed by the work Will's been doing in this area.
And how can you, because obviously not everyone can actually cycle, so for those people who can't cycle, how are you going to actually sort of get people to the first stage of actually sort of learning how to get on a bike, sort of being a bit concerned about wobbling and sort of actually sort of potentially not actually having access to a bicycle themselves?
It's a very important point, and actually what we're doing is significantly increasing the number of schools engaged with our free cycle training and active travel programs, STARS. I mean, that's really important because if you get, the evidence is if you get young people interested in cycling, that's something that they then stick with as they become young adults and into adulthood as well. As well as that, and very importantly, we're doubling the number of adults who receive free cycle training every year, because I do recognise that there are people who perhaps did cycle when they were younger, have actually somehow stopped cycling, lack the confidence, and that's why the Mayor's point on the quality of the infrastructure, particularly on the quiet ways, to ensure there is a consistent quality threshold that we apply is so important to give people the confidence. And also, I do think that it may sound like a slightly trite point, but I do think the terminology of talking as we did historically about cycle superhighways is in itself off-putting for some of the people who might otherwise take hold of take up cycling. This is not a racetrack. This is about ensuring that cycling is open, accessible, and something that everyone should be confident of the quality of the cycle route, and confident that they will get the right infrastructure. And of course, our cycling infrastructure database is freely available for people, so they know the facilities on particular lines of route as well.
And are there particular parts of Outer London, for example, where this is a particular issue to crack? Well, I think that clearly on the quiet way, some of the work that we've been doing in
Enfield, Waltham Forest, for example, Kingston is really important, where we've seen some real progress on the Quiet Way rollout. And I think we're increasingly looking at the type of network for cycling across London that we see for other modes of transport. And so we can, cycling will play a very important part in delivering the Mayor's transport strategy in Outer London, along with walking where appropriate, and along with bus service provision, as we talked about earlier on. So we continue to have I certainly continue to have very good discussions with borough leaders and chief executives, and I know that Hadi Alexander, the Deputy Mayor, does, and the Mayor does himself on a regular basis.
Great. And do you perceive the cost of a bicycle as being something that puts people off getting involved?
Well, can I say, when I was, Simon McCartney took me this week to the Tottenham Cafe Connect, good example of a community there, second-hand bikes being used, but to encourage people who previously wouldn't have thought about getting on a bike, different shapes and sizes, different genders, different ages, having the confidence to get on a bike. And the great thing there was it was the community coming together, bit of assistance from us. Will Norman went recently to Limehouse Women's Cycle Project with Londoners of Bengali origin, women, getting on a bike as well. So we can assist on appropriate schemes across London. We're also encouraging employers to have various schemes to encourage their employees, whether it's a loan system, to encourage them to cycle to work as well. You'll be aware how good City Hall has been traditionally in relation to shower facilities, loan schemes, etc. We'll encourage more employers to do that. Part of the Good Work Standard is going to be encouraging good employers to encourage their employees to think about how they can cycle to work.
Great, thank you.
Assembly Member Copley.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you both. Mr Mayor, you have said that by March 2021 you will have started on property development sites covering 320 acres of land, TfL land, that will support 10,000 new homes. In June 2016, the Commissioner said that this is very much the first phase. When will you announce what phase 2 will comprise of?
Well, just to give you an update on phase 1. So you're right, the ambition of phase 1 was extremely ambitious. The Commissioner and I have agreed by 2021 to have started 10,000 homes across our city, half of which must be genuinely affordable. And the context is, you mentioned 300 acres. I mean, TfL is responsible, I appreciate it includes roads, stations, depots, tracks, of roughly speaking 5,000 acres. So that's the context, and a lot of it's complex. And so the key thing there is speaking to neighbours in relation to unlocking access to some of these sites. There could be a borough, there could be a developer, and those conversations take place. Mike has a very good team who are working on this, and so I'm not sure there'll be a big bag announcement in relation to phase 2. What the Commissioner and his team are doing, I suspect, is talking to neighbouring developments on individual sites. So I'm sure the Commissioner can talk about some of the work his team's doing.
So I think that's absolutely right. What the Mayor said is this clearly will be that now a sort of rollout of individual schemes as they become viable, because we've been having discussion with neighbouring landowners. So, for example, I just talk about a new relationship that we've been having with Network Rail, where there are often pockets of land that sit adjacent to each other. So Kidbrooke in Greenwich, for example, is a great opportunity where the division of land between Network Rail ourselves and indeed the private sector and the borough has meant that having an overall approach to the site is much more viable for the developers in partnership to work with. So that's the kind of thing we'll continue to be pursuing. I think the other thing I would just give you reassurance on is that the collaboration and working together of the Mayor's core team within the GLA and our team within Transport for London, I mean, this is really one team now, in effect, and the way this is happening and the interaction with boroughs for this development is hugely important. So, this is a hugely important part of our work. I'm absolutely committed to the 50% affordable. We're also out at the moment in the market looking at build to rent, which is an increasing area of opportunity, I think, in London, where the private rental, high quality, affordable private rental sector is extraordinarily low compared to any other large city in Europe and the world, and that's quite exciting. Where there'll be an announcement quite soon on the successful bidder to work with us on that.
Yes, so we look forward to that. We're looking at this, of course, shortly on the Housing Committee. And I'm pleased to hear that you've been working collaboratively with Network Rail as well. I believe that in May 2016, I think it was the Mayor who said that TfL was assessing the capacity for a development of a further 300 acres over the 300 that's already been identified. Is this assessment going to be published at some point?
We can certainly do that. I'm very happy to share with you where we've got to and the progress. There's nothing secret or commercially confidential about this. So very happy to share that with yourself and the Assembly members more broadly.
Thank you very much. I think the estimate was something like between 20 and 40,000 homes in total, potentially dependent on density, etc. across TfL's land. And in terms of affordable, obviously it's incredibly welcome, Mr. Mayor, when you came in that you introduced a requirement across the TfL portfolio of 50% affordable, which wasn't there before. But obviously there's a conflicting pressure in terms of TfL's finances and affordable housing in terms of the revenue that can be generated for TfL. How are you balancing this?
Good question. So the good news is that the business plan that TfL has in there a recognition that 50% will be genuinely affordable. So it's worth reminding ourselves, because we may forget, and it's important to remind London over the next 18 months that we ditched the dodgy definition of what an affordable home is. And we've got a definition that actually means genuinely affordable. So it makes it harder, but TfL are quite clear in their understanding of what we mean. So in the business plan, there's a figure for the revenues TfL need to bring in via surplus TfL land, but that includes a calculation that is 50% genuinely affordable. And my understanding is that the business plan is still, still the sums add up. But the good news is that the numbers of homes that have been given planning permission is on course to meet that 10,000 target. I think 3,000 have already been given permission. Another 1,200 are in the pipeline, and there's some more in the pipeline. So we're on course to meet that, and also to make sure the business plan is satisfied in relation to the revenues that need to be generated.
Okay, thank you very much.
We will now go on to the next set of questions, which are from Assembly Member Russell and relates to healthy streets.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, if you could answer the lead-off question, and then I've got questions afterwards for the Commissioner.
Thank you. Last year I published London's first Vision Zero action plan, which sets out bold and ambitious plans to eliminate deaths and serious injuries on London streets by 2041. This is part of my wider healthy streets approach, which aims to make London a greener, healthier and more attractive place to live, work and do business. TfL is committed to delivering on these ambitions, and has increased investment in the Healthy Streets initiative to £2.3 billion announced in TfL's latest business plan. This record investment is taking place despite TfL facing some significant external financial headwinds. These include the loss of £700 million per year on average operating grant from central government, the consequences of a subdued national economy, the future revenue loss due to the delay in opening the Elizabeth line, and the absence of any funding from central government for the maintenance of London's strategic road network. However, safety is our priority, and we'll be continuing to work towards our Vision Zero ambition to make our streets safer. Vision Zero is about doing everything in our power to prevent serious injury and the needless loss of life in our transport network. We can't accept that deaths and injuries on our roads is simply the price that some must pay for travelling around our city. And I'd remind Chair the Assembly, every year around 4,000 people are killed or injured on London streets. This is simply unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and it's very good to see your very solid support for the Vision Zero ambitions. Now, following our last discussion about cycling, I've now met with your Walking and Cycling Commissioner to discuss your new quality criteria. It's very good that you're using a quality standard to focus the use of TfL funds only on the strongest schemes that really deliver healthy streets and help with your Vision Zero ambition. So I'd like to ask the Commissioner, how about the boroughs that are not meeting the standard? Will you engage with them to help them raise their game? And if they don't raise their game, will you be holding back funding?
Well, we'll certainly engage with them to ensure that the highest possible standards are applied across the whole of London. I think I would be glass half full in my perspective on this, in that we will, I would be optimistic that we will get an acceptance across London as to the logic of having a London-wide high-quality standard. So I haven't given any consideration to the implication if they don't meet that standard. I'm just going to continue to pursue discussions with boroughs, as I have on a regular basis, that we do meet that standard, and working very closely, as the Mayor said, with the Walking and Cycling Commissioner to ensure that happens.
Okay. The other point that I'm worried about is that the pace of delivery is not moving fast enough. If we look at the cycling budget, for example, 142 million of the cycling budget has gone unspent since during this mayoral term. And the amount that has been spent each year on cycling has gone down year on year. So my question again for the Commissioner, you've not actually built the schemes that money was allocated to. Now you've got to build much more each year to catch up, and that's showing in the current business plan. Do you have the capacity in TfL to deliver all the schemes that you need to deliver to spend that money?
We do, and that's one thing that I was very determined that we had in the going through of the business plan internally before I took it to the Mayor and then indeed the Assembly. So absolutely we do. I'm determined that we will continue the progress we've made on cycling schemes. So, recently in January, started public engagement for a number of new routes, as you will be aware of, across London. I could list them all out, but I don't want to waste your time in doing so. You know where they are. But I think it demonstrates the momentum, if I may, Chair, through you, that we are continuing to
Okay, now picking up on the momentum, just looking at tracking progress. At the moment, TfL actually make it very difficult for people to track your progress on these targets on delivery. So, for example, the Budget and Performance Committee on the 7th of January asked for details of the capital programme expenditure, project by project, how they'd been classified into the categories of critical, central, desirable and deprioritised. It's a month later and that information isn't yet available. Do you know when that information will be available?
It should be very soon. I'm talking about in the next few days. I think
in the next few days. Less than a week.
Well, I would be very optimistic it should be, because I talked to the team just yesterday to ask that very question.
Okay, and on healthy streets in particular, the reporting to the TfL board is not comprehensive. It doesn't allow the whole programme to be scrutinised. Now, will you provide more detail to allow us to track the spending and delivery on all healthy street schemes so we can tell how you're doing, like with a sort of red, amber, green rating for each project?
I'm very happy to share that as openly and transparently as I can, as I do with everything to do with transport in London. And in fact, I'm very happy to organise the team to have an offline discussion with you about how we could better present that progress.
That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. And then finally, I've got something that may actually also provide a bit of a solution to the working with the boroughs. Chris Boardman tweeted on the 25th of January, he's working on transport in Greater Manchester, "We don't do bids anymore, just submissions, every quarter, ongoing, forever as far as I'm concerned. This is how we do streets now. If a scheme doesn't meet our rigorous standards, we help them bring it up to scratch and resubmit. Our ambition will match each of the boroughs." Now, will you consider trying an ongoing process like this in London?
Well, we do. I mean, I'm pleased to see Manchester learning from us. And I'll give you an example of the fruits of the conversations that we've been having, is the recent fruition of the conversations with Hammersmith in relation to what was CS9. Good example of City Hall, TfL and the team working with Hammersmith, who've done an excellent job in coming forward with a scheme which is a big improvement on the previous scheme. You can call it a bid, you can call it a submission, we call it Team London delivering for our city.
Thank you very much. I'll leave it.
Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Just a brief one, Chairman. Mr Mayor, with regard to Vision Zero, can you just tell us what your targets in terms of bus deaths will be by 2020?
To hand, I've not got that figure by 2020. Have you got the calculator?
No, I don't think we've got a. I don't think I have a specific target. What I would say is, what it's worth saying is the number of measures that we're putting in to play on buses with bus operators to ensure that we deliver a continual improvement Very unfortunately, the first pedestrian this year died this week because of a collision with a bus at Camden. I'm, of course, very sorry that that happened. But things like the type of technology that applies speed restrictions to buses automatically so that bus drivers don't...
We applaud Vision Zero, we do. But obviously it'll be the end of the mayoralty, and it'd be super to see just how well this mayor has done. Because Assembly Member Pigeon has already said that it's difficult to get interim targets, pace of delivery is slow, and I agree with her.
Well, I think
so given it's the end of the mayor's term, what are you aiming for? What would you like to see?
Well, I would like to see zero. So let me be very clear that any single death or serious injury on London's road network, whether it involves a bus or anything else, is one too many.
We all appreciate that. Have you not got a figure?
Everything that we are doing to ensure that bus driver training, for example, the next phase of London-wide bus driver training
with respect.
is applied with...
I appreciate all of that, but that's not the question. Mr Mayor, I asked you, what figure do you hope to get to, or what are you aiming for by the end of this mayoralty, 2020?
I'm aiming for a reduction in the amount of deaths and serious injuries.
Of course, but by how much?
70% reduction in killed and serious injuries by 2022 is the aim from the current level. Clearly, that will... I can't quite compute that back to what that would mean by 2020, but that's the trajectory that we're seeking to do.
Given it's the end of the mayoralty on 2020, do you think you could get us some figures so that we can all see how well
I work on a continual
done?
basis with the greatest respect. I don't work to mayoral terms. I work to deliver the right outcomes.
No, but the mayor does, with respect. And you're working to the mayor. So perhaps you can look at that to see if we could have some figures, because we do want to hold you to account, and it would be nice to see just how well or not you're doing on that particular thing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So the next table question is from Assembly Member Prince and relates to London's motorists.
Thank you, Chair. Last year, the southwest of England received £269 million from the government for roads funding. London received just £20 million. Following the removal of TfL's £700 million annual operating grant by the government and its refusal to consider devolving vehicle excise duty to London, there's currently no source of funding exclusively set aside for London's roads. As a consequence, TfL has no option but to subsidise the operation and maintenance of our roads from elsewhere, primarily from the surplus generated by the London Underground, meaning that public transport users subsidise motorists. The reality is Londoners contribute in the region of £500 million a year to the Treasury in vehicle excise duty, but receive little in return. As with all other parts of the transport network, investment in roads is needed to ensure safe and reliable operation. But due to the financial constraints from the government, TfL has been forced to pause all non-safety critical renewal work for the second year running. This is not sustainable. This is not a sustainable position over the longer term. TfL is already developing the highest priority renewal projects for 2020 and 2021 onwards, including works on Vauxhall Bridge, the Westway and Rotherhithe Tunnel. I'm pleased that some of London's major arterial roads have been classified as falling within the scope of the Department for Transport's major road network guidance. It is not yet confirmed exactly which roads in London will be part of this network, and the government is yet to fully commit to funding the programme. Therefore, the extent to which this will be a useful funding source for London is unclear. TfL is also identifying potential schemes ahead of a funding submission to the government spending review this summer, as well as developing the outline business case for a scheme at Gallows Corner. However, I'm still concerned that many of the key roads connecting London with the rest of our country, including those leading to the Blackwall Tunnel, are missing from the final defined network and therefore will not be eligible for vital funding. Of course, we need to move to a situation where many more road users are using cleaner, healthier and more efficient transport options like walking, cycling and buses. That's why TfL has increased investment in its latest business plan to support these alternatives. But what's clear is that we do need long-term guaranteed funding for London's transport network, including the road network, so we can keep our city moving and open to business. And my administration will be making this case to the government in the lead-up to its planned spending review.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Commissioner, could I ask you a question, please? The Mayor has indicated that with frozen road maintenance, I assume that's proactive road maintenance he's referring to. Tell me, what is the usual cost of proactive road maintenance year on year?
Well, I'll have to give you the breakdown of the figures, because clearly it depends on the type of maintenance we're doing, whether it's on the ironwork or pothole work or whatever else. I would just say, just to reassure you and assure the Assembly, that you're quite right, it is proactive road maintenance. There is no question of us not dealing with safety critical issues as and when they emerge, including potholes and including in particular areas where the road surface may be compromised that may affect vulnerable road users such as cyclists.
No doubt about that. Yeah, I've got no doubt about that.
Sorry?
Sorry, could you give me the figures then?
I can't, as I said, I can't give you the specific
Right.
breakdown because it is varied across the piece, but it is clearly a direct result of the lack of the government subsidy, on average of 700 million a year, a significant proportion of which would have been used on proactive road maintenance. This is the second planned year of a reduction in that proactive road maintenance that we've had to do as a result of that reduction in the grant.
All right, perhaps if I phrase the question slightly differently then. You've said quite correctly that the proactive road maintenance has been frozen for 2 years. How much are you spending on road maintenance this year and last year compared to the years before?
It's a much smaller percent. It's about 10% of where we would have been spending, because we are only spending on the proactive, on the reactive maintenance, on where there are issues that need to be picked up from a health and safety perspective.
So it's 10% of what it would have been.
Yeah.
So either what is 10% or what is 90%? I can do the maths myself.
Well, I can get you those figures offline as to what it was, but as I say, it's a direct result of not having any income for the road network that we can pass on to do on road maintenance.
Yeah, I think you've made that point. So you will write. Could you write to me with
I will, of course.
Give me a 4-year
I'd be delighted
figure
to.
of how much we spent, and then so on. Good. That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, or is it afternoon? Whatever it is. Do you expect April's ULEZ opening to go off without a hitch?
Oh, it depends how you define a hitch. I'm looking forward to it starting on April the 8th. I appreciate the Conservative Party is opposed to cleaning up the air in London, but we're keen to proceed with the plans we have, and I'm hoping it's a success. As I said in answer to a previous question, I'm still speaking to the Secretary of State for any additional assistance the government can assist us, for example, by assisting the London scrappage scheme. Notwithstanding that, we're still planning to proceed on April the 8th, and I'm hoping it does go off, in your words, without a hitch.
Thank you. Just for the record, we don't oppose cleaning up London's air, and as far as I'm aware, we're not opposed to the ULEZ in the core.
10 staff, and so we'll carry on talking to businesses to make sure we ameliorate any concerns they have and help them with the transition from the more polluting vehicles to cleaner vehicles or alternatives, and we'll carry on doing that, not just up until April the 8th, but afterwards as well.
So are you saying that there will be a period when you won't enforce on small businesses, or what are you saying there?
No, clearly, I wouldn't telegraph in advance of something beginning that we're going to go easy. What I'll do is make sure we carry talking to businesses and those who represent businesses, in particular small businesses. And that's one of the points I made to Michael Gove when I spoke to him last week, that any assistance the government can give to businesses in London will be greatly appreciated by them and clearly by me as the Mayor, who believes in trying to clean up the air sooner rather than later.
If a business is operating within the ULEZ, so let's say it's a small business working out of City Hall, just for geographical uses, if that vehicle doesn't go outside of the zone, would that be picked up?
There are exemptions for residents inside the C-charge area, but if you are a business with a vehicle that's not compliant with the ULEZ requirements, then you'd have to pay a fee if you were going to carry on using that vehicle.
Yeah, that's correct.
But how would you pick it up? Things for use on roads, though, isn't it, under the law? Okay, so I accept that you have been doing some work in relation to informing people of the upcoming ULEZ, but there was a recent report that showed only 41% of respondents were actually familiar with the tighter emission standards, and nearly a third of them a third of businesses were unaware of when the ULEZ actually comes into force. So do you think what you've done is enough?
Well, I think it's not enough yet because we haven't finished. So we're still part way through this. But as I say, those 250,000 letters, the 150 digital screens at petrol stations, petrol pump nozzles. We've had features in the Metro newspaper. We've had some 2.8 million emails sent to users from on the TfL database. We're going to be sending more emails prior to the ULEZ implementation. But I think it is important, Chair, if I may, through you, just to say that we are, of course, targeting those who are at the moment driving into London on a regular basis or even on an occasional basis with a non-compliant vehicle. So it is no surprise to me that the numbers you are giving of the awareness, which is a much wider sample size that you're looking at for all Londoners, we are very specifically and very explicitly, in terms of ensuring that we spend public money wisely, targeting those who we know would be in breach of the ULEZ requirement when it's launched.
Yeah. Just a personal observation. I mean, I was quite pleased to see, I travel in daily, obviously, and I was pleased to see a big red sign saying, effectively, ULEZ coming on April, whenever 12, which is good. But the only problem is, I thought, is that it should have given us some kind of direction to say, visit TfL for more information or something, because what does it mean?
Well, can I just reassure you on that, because it's a really good point. So just to reassure you, we've had more than 2.3 million people check the website to see if their vehicle's compliant, which reassures me, because you're right, there's going to be different levels of awareness raising, just like an election, with different levels of awareness raising. And so Mike's point about micro-targeting people who are currently driving a vehicle that's not compliant is really important. It's, if you like, targeting voter ID, those that are, your voters. Yes. There's an air campaign, clearly the stuff that you've referred to and stuff, but if, for example, there had been fewer people, if very few people had checked the website for whether their vehicle was compliant, I'd be quite nervous about knowledge. That reassures me, and clearly the more and more that the Tory party oppose us, the more awareness there'll be of the ULEZ scheme. So please carry on articulating your opposition to the ULEZ.
I'm always delighted to oppose you, Mr Mayor, obviously, and thank you for the invitation, but I'm trying to help on this occasion. I just feel that
just be more effective at raising awareness of your opposition, please.
Well, I just feel that if you could put some reference on those signs to direct people to the website to learn more, and then that'd be helpful.
I think we'll certainly have a look at that. That's a reasonable suggestion. Yep.
Now, finally, in the survey, so 26% of small businesses surveyed said they would be unable to service or deliver to some customers or certain areas once the ULEZ is introduced. And at what point, what can you do, Mr Mayor, as a pro-business mayor, as you said you are?
Well,
I know you have sort of touched on it, but is there any more we can do?
Absolutely, there's always more we can do. And it's just really important to paint a complete picture, because I know you wouldn't want to directly or indirectly, intentionally or unintentionally mislead people. Businesses are in favour of this.
No, I leave that to you.
The CBI is supportive of ULEZ, demonstrating that I'm a pro-business mayor. London First, supportive of my ULEZ. LCCI have a large number of members who are road users, who are broadly supportive. The businesses are lobbying us to expand ULEZ to the North and South Circular, from Arriva to Balfour.
Can I just correct you there, Mr Mayor?
So we are speaking to businesses.
Can I just correct you there? Because this is in good humour, I think, and I appreciate that for a change. You're saying your ULEZ, it is obviously our ULEZ. We thought of it first. You do appreciate your predecessor.
Chair, I think we're seeing the start of a U-turn here.
No.
This is really important.
No.
So the Conservatives are now claiming they are in favour of ULEZ beginning on April the 8th. I think this may be a U-turn. Now the question is, does Assembly Member Bailey agree with you, or does he disagree with you? I look forward to Assembly Bailey.
Mr Mayor, it's not a U-turn, it's a ULEZ.
You're very quiet.
When
Assembly Member
Bailey
is sitting in your chair, people answer
just like in Parliament, the Conservative Party here is divided.
Mr Chairman, can I just, this is coming about time, but can I just remind the Mayor that we ask the questions. It's not your position to ask the questions of the Assembly members. So,
Chair, I'm sorry we've seen another Tory split here.
So, there's no split. We're 300% behind Mr Bailey, and we look very much forward to him sitting in that chair come 2020.
So, Chair, I'm unclear. I'm unclear. So what is the Conservative position as of 11:35 on the 7th of February? Because I'm sure it will change by tomorrow.
The point has been fairly made by Assembly Member Prince that you don't ask the questions, he does.
Right.
So, and I was trying to help you there, Mr Mayor, but is there any more you can do to help small businesses?
Okay, well, Chair, I'm not sure which question, because the previous question was, it's worth just, Chair, being accurate, because I know you'd want to be so, Chair. The previous question began with a proposition that the Conservative Party are in favour of this ULEZ.
Chairman, on a point
I was trying to...
Point of order, Chairman. The Mayor is deliberately wasting our time. He was asked a very clear question there. Is there more you can do to help small businesses? He's deliberately wasting our time, and everyone in this room knows that's exactly what he is doing. Can we please have a time added back on? If the Mayor wants to grandstand in this way, fine. But we'd like to have another 5 minutes on our time.
Let me answer. It is the responsibility of members to keep the Mayor on track. If you think that the Mayor is filibustering, tell him so. Right, it's not my job to tell him.
It is your job.
Mr Chairman,
you conduct the meeting.
Sorry, I'm conducting the meeting. Excuse me. I am conducting the meeting, and I expect members to hold the Mayor to account.
Right. Excuse me, it's my question. What I'm going to do, actually, Chair, is I am going to withdraw the question because I've given the Mayor more than one opportunity to, and it was genuinely trying to be helpful. To tell Londoners how he can help small businesses more in relation to ULEZ. He's chosen instead, regrettably, to just grandstand and try and make political points. So I'll withdraw the opportunity for him to get some good publicity for himself. Thank you very much.
Okay, Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the point being we agree with the ULEZ, but not being brought in when it is, because it is damaging small businesses. And you say you're going to be the most pro-business mayor ever. There's absolutely no evidence of that going forward whatsoever. You've said you expect the opening of ULEZ to run pretty smoothly. So if it does go badly or less well than you think it's going to go, will you learn lessons from that and consider making changes to your plans for the 2021 expansion?
Well, Chair, I'm glad we've got clarity. The Conservative Party opposes ULEZ beginning this April 2019. Those businesses that support ULEZ beginning as I've planned to do so are the CBI, which is a business organisation, London First, which represents over 200 of London's leading employers, the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Can you answer the question, Mr Mayor, please?
I'm sorry, Chair, but the question contained a premise that this was not pro-business. It is pro-business, as indeed is the current Mayor.
Can you answer the question?
I think I just did, Chair.
Yes. Can you just concentrate on the questions I'm asking you? And I'm actually saying to you, if the ULEZ does not run smoothly, like you seem to think it will, which is amazing because so many other things you do doesn't, if things go badly or less well than you expect, will you then learn lessons from that and seek to at least make changes to your plans for the 2021 expansion?
Well, Chair, I know the Conservatives oppose ULEZ beginning on April the 8th, but we're keen to make it work as best as we can on April the 8th, 2019. And there's a very important reason why. Each year in London, thousands of Londoners die prematurely.
Yeah, you're not answering the question again, are you, Mr Mayor?
Well, Chair, I'll answer the question as I think is best to answer the question. I appreciate it doesn't suit the party political interests of the member asking the question. It's not my fault if her party opposes a policy supported by 82% of Londoners.
I'm asking,
who
Mr Mayor, if it doesn't go well, will you look at the
policy.
2021 expansion? It's quite a simple question.
Chair, listen, I appreciate that it's very difficult for the Conservatives to oppose a policy that is directly targeting one of the biggest killers of London prematurely.
You've told us that several times.
Well, the question's been asked several times, Chair.
No. But the Assembly member doesn't think that you're answering the question.
Well, she's entitled to think what she wants, Chair.
No, the whole point of this is we ask you questions, you're supposed to answer. It's a very simple question, Mr Mayor, especially for you. The simple question is, if the ULEZ does not run smoothly, and we're pleased that you think it will do, but if it doesn't, will you learn lessons from that and consider making changes to the plans for the 2021 expansion?
Well, Chair, listen, Chair, can I just say, I don't mind at all, as rude as the Senator wants to be. I'm used to Tories being rude to me. The point is this.
I don't think she's being rude
to you.
you.
Well, you would, would you, Tony? Well, you wouldn't. Well, you wouldn't. Well, you wouldn't, Chair. Chair, you know, I long for the day when we have an impartial chair. Maybe when we've got a new one, that day will come.
Answer the
now,
question.
I appreciate, Chair, I appreciate how divided the Tory group on the London Assembly is. I get this.
You and Jeremy
I appreciate
Corbyn.
the problems that you have, but I do not resolve from the fact we have in London a situation where thousands of Londoners are dying prematurely because of the bad quality air.
Stop,
we have situations
you're not
in London.
You're saying
I have
it's
a policy
again. It's
that's being
again.
opposed by the
Shall we
Conservative
try
Party.
another question,
but I'm in
Mr. Mayor, that
favour
you might
of
want
this
to
policy we
answer?
brought in on April the 8th.
Shall we try another one that you might choose to answer? Because clearly you don't know the answer to that very simple question. So the next question, how many Londoners does TfL estimate will be forced off the road in April due to not being able to afford to run or replace their non-compliant car?
Well, Chair, can I welcome the young children who are in the Assembly to watch this behaviour? Can I just say to the children, that's what Conservatives do, they're very rude.
Can you answer,
but
can
that's
you
not how we
answer
behave
the question?
on this side of the room. You're most welcome. Chair, the answer to one of the questions asked by the Assembly member, I think the most recent one, was a question based on a premise that I don't accept, which is people being forced off the road. What I'm hoping we do see is behaviour change from those who currently drive into London with a vehicle that's contributing to the bad quality air in our city. So, for example, we know there are people driving into the congestion charge area whose vehicles emit too much nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide and particulate matter. And for those children watching, what this can lead to is your lungs being underdeveloped forever.
Can you just
and so what I'm trying to do,
on
children,
the
is to have a policy that
Yes,
reduces the chance
yeah.
of you having lungs that are underdeveloped. That's why it's
Mr.
so
Mayor,
important
you're using
to clean up the air in London.
I thought the question was about people being forced off the road because of the affordability.
Absolutely.
Of your charge.
Well, Chair, and I made the point in answer to my question, is that I don't accept the premise of the question, which is people being forced off the road. What I think will happen, as we've seen with the toxicity charge, and we've already seen, hopefully, in the lead up to the ultra emission zone, is people changing their behaviour. Because, for example, they may choose to buy a Euro 6 compliant vehicle if it's diesel, or a Euro 4 compliant vehicle if it's petrol, or a Euro 3 compliant vehicle if it's, say, motorcycle, or some people may decide to walk or cycle or use public transport.
And the most poor in our society often can't afford to replace these.
Well,
Mr.
Chair,
Mayor,
it's really
do you
important again,
accept that
Chair,
with car
there's a false
tax,
premise in that question. Because what we do know...
No, you don't answer the questions. That is the problem. This is another question. Try this one. Do you accept that with car tax and insurance, the cost of MOTs, taxes on fuels as well, potentially the congestion charge and the ULEZ, London motorists are already charged a huge amount? So, can you tell me, what are your thoughts around road pricing?
Well, Chair, the question contained a premise at the beginning, which is the poorest Londoners will suffer the most.
No.
It's worth reminding...
That was
I
last
thought
question.
that was the preview. I thought that was
What
the
are
previous
your thoughts on
road pricing now?
What are your thoughts, Mr. Mayor, on road pricing? Other members here have brought it up. Some of us are absolutely not for it. You clearly need to know where you stand on it. So can you tell us where you stand on road pricing?
Well, Chair, the point I was going to make, which is an important point, is the poorest Londoners are least likely to own a car.
Can you tell us where you stand on road
most likely
pricing?
to suffer the worst consequences of the poor quality air. So it's really important to realise this is an issue of social justice. And unlike the Conservative Party, we believe in addressing
road pricing, Mr.
You're
Mayor.
not being asked about social justice, Mr. Mayor. You're being asked what your views are on road pricing.
Chair, I know you're against social justice, but the question
No,
is
Mr. Mayor, don't impute motive to me.
Please
Answer a question.
What are your thoughts on road pricing?
Well, Chair, the transport strategy that I've published some time ago, and I'm disappointed that the Assembly hasn't taken the trouble to read the strategy. It's a very good strategy.
What are your thoughts on road pricing, Mr. Mayor?
The transport strategy sets out our views on
What are your
road
thoughts,
pricing.
Mr. Mayor? Just so that the young people that have just joined us can hear. What would you say to them about road pricing?
Well, Chair, I've been invited to talk to the young children, so I'll do so. Children, we've published a document
No,
called...
Mr Mayor, please do try and answer this question.
Sorry,
This is what you're here for.
I'm being stopped from talking to you, children. I do apologise.
I apologise as well, but I want the answer. What are your thoughts on road pricing?
Well, what I've said, Chair, in the transport strategy is we need to be exploring...
Do you approve
technology.
of it, or do you not approve of it?
I mean, Chair, for goodness sake, I've got to answer a question. I mean, this is ridiculous now. I mean, come on, just please put it aside. Just... We know the problems.
Honestly, Mr. Mayor, I am known for my objectivity. I cannot understand why you can't tell the Assembly member what your views are on road pricing.
No,
well, I'm trying to, Chair, but I keep getting heckled from the Chamber, and not you, children. Our policy on our strategy on road pricing is set out in our transport strategy, which sets out we will explore road pricing technology as and when it comes on. What's clear is that technology is nowhere near being ready to be utilised. What I have been quite clear and explicit about in both my manifesto and since is what we're not going to do is increase congestion charging, which is a form, some would say, of road pricing.
Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right, Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, Chair.
He does sometimes think he is, but he's not.
No, he doesn't.
I would just like to come in on this question, since the lead-off question was looking at subsidy and motorists, and ask you about any progress that you're making on workplace parking levies.
And can I say, Chair, we are speaking to a number of local authorities about this. I think it would be unwise for me to name who they are, but a number of local authorities have been speaking to us about the possibility of doing this. They can see the benefits of having their town centres, having fewer cars on the town centres. You'll be aware of the latitude we've given them. So we are speaking to a couple of local authorities in London about the possibility of them doing so.
Okay, I mean, I think Hounslow Council have already consulted on a workplace parking levy. So is this something that TfL wants to progress? Can you see this as being a helpful intervention in London's...
Well, I think, as the Mayor has said, there are a number of boroughs looking at such schemes, and just to reassure you, TfL will, of course, facilitate any discussions with those boroughs as their thinking emerges and evolves.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Assembly Member Boff. Oh, I should welcome the children from St Joachim's Catholic Primary School. This display hasn't been put on just for you. It's like this all the time. Right. Okay. Assembly Member Boff.
Thank you. When will the bus fleet be zero emission?
Well, we think of the 9,000 buses we have, roughly speaking, 6,000 are ULEZ compliant. A few hundred are zero emission capable. I think Mike's looking for the figures now. By 2020, we hope the entire bus fleet should be ULEZ compliant, Euro 6 compliant. I think the Commissioner will find the numbers.
I'm talking about zero emission specifically. I'm
not
talking about the ULEZ.
I think the Commissioner's looking for the page, because that is in our briefing in relation to... We've got a number of single-decker buses, and we're looking at the technology around the double-decker buses as well.
Yeah, I will find the number in a second. Sorry, bear with me.
In an answer to me a few months back, you said by 2037 your bus fleet will be zero emission, i.e. when these young children are in their mid-20s, they will have the benefit of zero emission, but they're going to have to wait till then.
Well, as you raise the children's benefit, I give them the truth rather than a misleading point. So with the new buses we're bringing in, which are Euro 6 compliant, we've seen from parts of London, they've already improved the quality of air. So in Putney, in Brixton, in other parts of London, we've got low-emission bus zones. And in the low-emission bus zones, we have Euro 6 compliant buses. And already the amount of nitrogen dioxide emitted and particulate matter emitted, which is poisonous, has gone down hugely. So it's not true to say you need to have zero-emission buses to make the air better. The pathway to having zero-emission buses is to have what's called Euro 6 compliant buses. And the good news is we're cleaning up our buses. We've got more buses than most cities in the world, more than 9,000. Already 6,000 are Euro 6 compliant, which is more safe than they would have been previously. We're going to make sure all of them are ULEZ compliant, but the ultimate ambition is for all of them to be zero emission rather than simply Euro 6.
So it'll be, it'll be 68 new zero-emission double-decker buses on the way this year. So we're continuing to make progress. As the Mayor said, the progress actually on the retrofit to Euro 6 standard is going very well. Just to reassure Assembly members.
Does that make it zero emission?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. So I would just say all single-deck buses will be zero-emission by 2020, and the pathway to double-deck buses continues apace. It is true to say, though, as the Mayor said, that the Euro 6 compliant bus is a very important milestone. I get a weekly report every Friday of the progress for the retrofit of the existing bus fleet, and I'm happy to report to you and other Assembly members that trajectory of progress continues as planned.
So thank you. So it's fair to say, Mr. Mayor, for addressing the children here, which is always good, those acronyms and codes that you threw at them, that I'm sure they all understand implicitly, and I don't understand them all, but I'm sure they do. But it's the truth of the matter is, for these children, is that they will still be breathing in diesel fumes from buses when you're 25. You will still be breathing in diesel fumes because the Mayor doesn't want to go any
Chair, when you're
faster.
acting as the Chair, you can get to the question.
Now, is that not the case?
Anytime, in your own time, Chair.
He's giving you a taste of your own medicine, Mr. Mayor.
Is it not the case that these children will be breathing in diesel fumes from your buses until 2037? Is that true? Is that true?
There was a question.
Mr. Mayor, is it true that these children will be breathing in diesel emissions from your buses until 2037?
You're out of time. He's
managed to shake his head and avoid the answer.
Assemblymember,
because it's true. Because your ULEZ posturing is exactly that. Posturing, but doing actually practically nothing to solve air pollution problems in London.
Assemblymember Esholomi.
Apologies, kids. Mr. Mayor, coming back to the ULEZ and the fact that actually it is the poorest Londoners who are suffering with poor air quality. So the action that you're introducing will actually have a big impact on helping children like this in terms of improving their lungs. I know that there's a scrappers scheme you've launched, and I should declare an interest in that. I do have a car, I do drive, but it's literally to Tesco's and back. And whatever, Tony. And the fact is that there are a number of small businesses who are concerned. Can you update me on what's happening on that scrappage scheme and if you continue to lobby the government to actually match that?
Can I say in passing how disappointed I am that Assemblymember Bailey beat Assemblymember Boff? Because I'd have loved to have hustings where this guy loses the brag. But there you go. I'll have to deal with Assemblymember Bailey. But dealing with your question about the scrappage scheme, we've announced £23 million for a London scrappage scheme. And it's worth reminding Londoners that despite me lobbying the government for them to assist us with our scrappage scheme, they've declined to do so far. But I'm hopeful that the conversations I've had with Michael Gove will lead to some fruition, and so we can help more Londoners move from polluting vehicles to cleaner forms of vehicles. It's really important to remind ourselves that the Conservative Party opposed an ultra-low emission zone beginning on April the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, we now move on to the final table question, which is from Assemblymember Curtin and relates to black cabs.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Chair. London's taxis provide a reliable and trusted service to Londoners, tourists and business people, offering customer safety and convenience. Taxi drivers use wheelchair-accessible vehicles and are required to meet the strictest safety standards. They possess the incredible geographical recall and sense of direction that only those with the knowledge have. My 2016 Taxi and Private Hire Action Plan outlined several measures that TfL have put in place. We've ensured that drivers can continue to access bus lanes, a right we previously defended in court to support quicker and more convenient journeys, introduced card and contactless payment in all taxis, exceeded our target of a 20% increase in taxi ranks across London by 2020, and are continuing to press for additional rank locations across London. We've enabled access to an additional 18 bus lanes at key locations in our road network, and written to London boroughs to seek access to bus lanes and roads they control. We've applied to the Office of Qualifications and Examinations, seeking recognition for the knowledge to be accredited as a formal qualification, published a brochure, How to Become a Taxi Driver, to encourage and promote the benefits of becoming one of London's taxi drivers. Taxis are switching to brand new purpose-built zero-emission capable taxis. So far, TfL has licensed over 1,100 ZEC taxis, and I want this to increase significantly in the coming years. In December, we announced further plans to tackle taxi emissions and support drivers in switching to these new ZEC taxis. This included proposals on plans to reduce the age limit of the most polluting taxi vehicles from 15 years to 12, with a public consultation planned for early this year. To provide drivers with financial support to make the switch to cleaner, environmentally responsible vehicles, TfL has restructured its de-licensing fund. This £80 million fund now provides up to £10,000 for those who trade in their older, dirtier vehicles early, which is double the maximum amount of the previous scheme. In addition, TfL has set up a £2.5 million fund to help drivers of eligible Euro 5 taxis to convert to LPG. TfL will continue to expand London's rapid charging infrastructure and has already met its target of installing 150 rapid charging points by the end of 2018, with 64 solely dedicated to taxis, and we're now working to achieve the next target of delivering a total of 300 by the end of 2020. Another key focus will be to continue to press the government to implement the legislative change needed to address the issues affecting taxi and private hire trades.
Great. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Mayor. Now, in your transport strategy, you say you want 80% of journeys to be made either walking or cycling or by public transport by 2041. That's your aim and your target. Does that 80% figure include taxis?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. But you've said in the past, taxis are a vital part of London's public transport system. So why does that 80% figure not include taxis if they're a vital part of London's public transport system?
I think the focus has been, if I may answer that, the focus has been clearly on the work to ensure that there is bus service accessible, an accessible bus service for everyone across London, which is why we're doing the work we're doing to reconfigure the bus network, as we discussed earlier on, and to ensure that we continue with the modernisation of the underground network, and indeed continue with our quest to have greater control over London suburban rail networks, for example, the routes into Moorgate that we were discussing earlier on. That does not mean that taxis haven't a part to play in terms of moving Londoners around the city, and the support given, as the Mayor outlined, to the black taxis in particular in terms of taxi ranks, so an increase from 500 to over 640, 20% increase, as the Mayor said, the promoting of the knowledge, the working with the taxi trade to ensure access to bus lanes. So I think they are an important contributing factor, but it's not included in the core number.
Okay, I hear your answer. I'm disappointed with your answer to that question, but let's move on. Now, you have offered the taxi delicensing scheme, a fund for taxi drivers who need to upgrade to a zero-emission capable taxi, particularly ones who are coming up to their taxis being 15 years old as they drop out of the licence. But the amount of money has been reduced from 42 million to 18 million. It's gone down by £24 million. Where's that money gone?
Well, firstly, it's worth reminding the Assembly that of the £42 million, only £485,000 had been used. So the previous scheme that was consulted on before I became Mayor, that was supported by the taxi trade, is clearly not fit for purpose because nobody's using it. Of the thousands of black taxis that would be eligible to de-license their vehicle using the scheme, only 192 have taken advantage. So we can leave that pot of money just sitting there, not doing what it's supposed to be doing, or we can devise a new scheme that's fit for purpose that encourages more drivers to de-license their vehicles. We had more taxi drivers take advantage and express an interest in the new scheme in the first 24 hours than the previous 17 months put together.
How many?
We'll be publishing those figures shortly, but more than 192
in
24 hours.
Okay.
So clearly, the new scheme is more advantageous.
Well, I mean, that's good.
I'm sure that you'll welcome that then.
Well, one of the things in your new scheme is that you have increased the maximum amount available from 5,000 to 10,000, but only for 250 taxi drivers, the first 250. But as there's now more of an interest, shouldn't you have kept that at 42 million? I mean, my question was, where has the rest of the money gone? Have you simply reallocated that 24 million into the diesel scrappage scheme for vans? Is that where it's gone?
No, that's not where it's gone. But I have in a previous Mayor's Question Time, Chair, said that I'm happy to look into if there is an interest from the taxi trade to delicensing, which means the amount of monies we would need would be more than £80 million.
But it must, okay, fine, but it must be somewhere.
Well, okay, fine, but
so I just wonder where has it gone? You know, it was a simple question. I mean, you've sort of propagandised your scheme, and it's new, and there's some new features of it, but where has the rest of the money gone? It doesn't seem you're going to answer that question today. But let me ask you about the number of zero emission capable taxis that you've got. You mentioned there 1,100 have already been registered. Now, you talked about a target of having 9,000.
Previous Mayor's target, but yeah, which I think is important.
But you're sticking to that target.
I think we should.
Okay, and is that by the beginning or the end of 2020?
Well, it's during 2020. I think one of the issues that people have raised with me is the production capacity of the plant producing the new taxis. I've been up there to see them. They are absolutely fully mobilised, delivering these fantastic new vehicles, who, by the way, as you will well know, when drivers drive the new vehicles, do think they're fantastic, as well as passengers with the additional facilities that they have. The question
was,
so,
I mean, it's a simple one,
yeah.
Is it by the beginning or the end of 2020?
It's during 2020.
During,
yeah.
So an unspecified date in 2020.
Well, during 2020. I mean, I think, you know, you can be overly precise with these figures.
To be fair, that chap who you're a big fan of, it's his target, so if you're going to criticise somebody, criticise him.
Well, I mean, you're the mayor now, so you do need to actually be able to talk about the
Boris
delivery
Johnson,
of those
to
things.
Be fair to the current mayor, it was set by the previous mayor, and as you're a big fan of his, you'd welcome that, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, you want 9,000 taxis to be zero emission capable because you're sticking to the target. I mean, so anyway, though we have to have that many, I mean, you say you're going to stick to that target. One issue with those is there simply aren't enough charging points for the taxi drivers who have bought ZECs to be able to access them. You said there's only 150. What are you going to do to increase the number of rapid charging points for these 9,000 ZECs that are going to come in the next year?
So of the target we had, my target was to have 150 rapid charging points by the end of 2018. We have those.
There are still queues, though. There's still not enough.
Sure. More than 60 are reserved just for taxi drivers. What we're trying to do is to work with local authorities to make sure that they also assist in making sure the rapid charging points are on the thoroughfares that are used by taxis. You're right. A taxi will take, roughly speaking, 20 minutes to half an hour to charge their taxi. If you're third behind that, that's you wait for an hour. Clearly not good enough if your trade is being on the road earning customers. So we're speaking to councils. The infrastructure committee is working also to see how we can accelerate the rollout of rapid charging points across London. It's not true to say, though, that the reason why only 192 people applied under the old scheme was because of lack of rapid charging points.
Okay. Another thing you mentioned,
on the rapid charging point?
I haven't got much time, so can I just ask you another thing about bus lanes? You have increased the number of bus lanes initially, but now there are schemes such as Tooley Street, such as Tottenham Court Road, where access is going to be restricted to taxis. Will you allow taxis to continue going eastbound in Tooley Street and along Tottenham Court Road?
We've had a consultation in relation to that particular road, and we'll respond to the consultation in due course.
I would say generally on bus lanes, this is, as you know, a right that we've defended for taxi drivers in court. There are still some roads where there isn't access to bus lanes for taxis on borough roads, and we continue to work with boroughs to ensure that access is as widespread as it can be. It's a very important issue. As the Mayor says, there's various consultations which I wouldn't want to fetter the outcome of, but it was a very highly responded to consultation.
Their time is up, Commissioner. Assembly Member Eshalomi.
Commissioner, relations with some in the taxi and private hire industry seems to have broken down given the recent blockades and strikes happening outside Palestra. Can you tell me what you're doing to repair that relationship, please?
Well, I meet regularly with the taxi trade senior representatives, and I'm happy to say that is a constructive dialogue. We don't always agree with each other on every single issue, but I think there is an effective dialogue now in place, which is really important, and that, of course, is supported by contacts that the Mayor himself has with the trade. I also met not so very long ago with the private hire trade representatives. I think there probably is an opportunity to do so again, because actually just in the last few days they have written to me asking that I do just that, and I'm more than happy to talk to people at any time. So I think dialogue is always the best way to resolve such differences as there are between us.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Russell.
The availability of rapid chargers. It's not only installing enough new ones, it's also making sure that the existing ones are actually working, because we're hearing about people saying that they're often out of order. So what are you doing specifically to make sure that the chargers that are already installed are actually reliably working?
Well, I have to be honest, Chair, through you, and say that I had not had that feedback. Nobody's contacted me directly on that. But if you have details on any areas of concern, I'm more than happy to deal with those and address those, of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Can we now move to the motion on the agenda set out in my name, namely that the Assembly notes the answers to the questions asked? Right. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you for such a good-tempered meeting. Can we now please go on to item 5, petitions?
When does Jeanette take over? It's an impartial chair.
Always impartial. Petitions. Will Assembly Member Prince please present the petition listed on the agenda in his name?
Thank you, Chairman. Chair Sadiq. I've been asked to present this petition on behalf of the residents of Latchmere by my colleague Kim Caddy, and it is we, the undersigned, call on Transport Authority to put in place measures to make the junction of Sherwood Road and Latchmere Road safe by installing a mirror. Also to review parking on Latchmere Road to ensure the visibility of traffic from Sherwood Road.
Thank you. Will you please agree to forward the petition to the Mayor as Chairman of TfL? Thank you very much. Assembly Member Cooper. Somebody going to present this for her?
Yes,
yep.
I've got two petitions to present on behalf of Assembly Member Cooper. The first one, which is about 20 pages, is about moving the bus stop off St. Anselm's Road on Tooting Back Road.
Yep.
And the second petition, which has attracted some 399 signatories, reads as follows. Dear Wandsworth Council, Mr. Mayor and Transport for London, air pollution contributes to 9,500 early deaths every year and is stunting the lungs and cognitive development of children and reduces their life expectancy. I think it's the same petition, actually.
Would you like to take it as read?
Yeah.
As on the order paper? How's that?
As on the order paper. Okay. It is the same petition, Chair.
Okay. Would you agree to forward these petitions, please? Thank you very much. Yeah. Assembly Member Pigeon, petition.
Thank you very much. I've got a petition of 1,178 signatures that says stop the bus cuts, keep buses serving Wellesley Road and West Croydon Station. TfL proposed to cut routes 50, 75, 109, 154, 197, 250, 264, 403, 405, 412 and 433. Routes from the south would not serve Wellesley Road, Whitgift Centre or West Croydon Station, and routes from the north would turn around at West Croydon instead of reaching Catherine Street. We, the undersigned, want our buses to continue to reach West Croydon Station and our shops. And since I submitted the petition, I've now got a further 42 signatures submitted to me as well.
Thank you very much. Will you please agree to forward the petition to the Mayor? Thank you very much. Will you please note the responses which have been received to a petition presented at recent Assembly meetings? Thank you very much. Now we have motions. The first motion on the agenda is in the name of Assembly Member Bailey, and amendment has been circulated. Assembly Member Bailey.
Do I have to say I accept the amendment now? I accept the amendment. It's entirely reasonable. It's quite helpful, actually. Thank you very much for that. Cancer. I spoke to a survivor recently who called it the big C. They said to me it's the very scariest word for them in the British language. Survival rates are on the increase due to the great work of scientists, doctors and many charities across the world. But still in the UK, 450 people die per day of the various forms of cancer that you can suffer from. Blood cancer is the 5th most common type of cancer. Can have high rates of chemotherapy to help them battle their cancer. But here in London and also worldwide, there's a shortage of donors from minority communities. In fact, if your family member needs this kind of transplant, only 20% chance that they'll be able to get a successful match. But this brings us to a wider point. Another benefit of the diversity of London is if we can do this, if we can increase the amount of Londoners on this list, because we have such a diverse population, we could really make a dent in this. Not only for diverse communities, but for the wider community as well. Closing this gap is particularly important for diverse communities, particularly important because I say only 20% chance of finding a match. And it's really important to help negate some of the real tragic stories you hear of people having to bury their children or their mothers, their fathers, their uncles, their aunts, their friends because they couldn't find a match in time. So I commend this motion to you because it is about the lives of Londoners and also London on the world stage. Because if you're in this register, you'll also be on the world stage as well. And it's just another way, a small but important way, that City Hall and the Mayor can do something really powerful for the health of Londoners. So please, I commend this motion to you.
Assembly Member Hall, do you wish to second?
I wish to second and reserve my place to speak later.
Okay, Assembly Member Sahota.
I'm delighted to support this motion, and I speak on behalf of the colleagues on the Labour benches. But this is also sits very comfortably with the work that the Health Committee has been doing recently on raising awareness on organ donation in London particularly, and also the wonderful work that we've been doing how to put this on the people's awareness. So I think it's very important that the Mayor does have a very important role to raise awareness of these important campaigns. But to do that, the Mayor needs funding for that. And I was quite concerned that last week the Conservatives moved a motion that the external budget, relations budget of the Mayor should go down by 1.4 million. If we want the Mayor to be doing these awareness campaigns, and I think the Mayor should be doing that, then I don't think we should be calling for the Mayor's external budgets to be going down, which he needs to engage with Londoners. So I am delighted that this motion will be brought forward, and we will be happy to support, and I think it's a powerful thing to do. But I just thought it was a bit disingenuous last week to call a cut in the external relations budget of the Mayor when he needs more of this sort of money to do this sort of work.
Assembly Member Twycross.
Formally second the amendment and I don't want to speak.
Assembly Member Hall.
Just very briefly, Chair, this is particularly close to my heart because I nursed somebody through leukemia, somebody I loved very much, and I lost them. Just to confirm to Dr. Sahota, we are never going to be against PR that promotes this sort of thing, ever. What we are against is the amount of PR that goes purely to promote the Mayor. So I absolutely support this. It's very close to my heart. Thank you.
Unless anybody objects, I propose to put the motion as amended. Those in favour, please show.
It's unanimous.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. The second motion is also in the name of Assembly Member Bailey.
What we have in common, that's what this is about. So we come in this chamber, we have all manner of disagreements, we fight, we quarrel about the small details, we hold the Mayor account. But ultimately, what we all have in common is that when we are in this chamber, we are part of a democracy, we vote for that democracy, and we work for that democracy. So when you have an attack of this nature that destroys monuments, that are trying to preserve the history, let people know how we got to this point, how our democracy works, how our allies, the Americans and the Canadians, fought in wars with us, how our own service personnel, the RAF, who've been defending this nation for a century now, or the Marines even longer, but just as importantly do huge amounts of humanitarian work all across the world. When you talk about Yvonne Fletcher, who was a young police officer, a metropolitan police officer, who was murdered when she was only 25 years old, trying to make our capital safer, the place that we call home. It's really important that somebody challenges the notion that this behaviour is acceptable. For many people, these organisations, these people are inspirational. So it's very important that we send a message that this is an insult. It is an attack on what we believe, our values. It's an insult to the people who gave, in some cases, the ultimate sacrifice to make this democracy, to make this very room exist, to make us exist as elected members. So I brought this motion here today so that we can send a message that we affirm our values as a liberal democracy, and that we take the dimmest view of this behaviour, and that we will support people. It's right to have an opinion, but not their right to attack our past, our beliefs, and our future. So I commend this to you, because I believe it reflects what we have in common, our shared love of democracy. So again, I commend this motion to you.
Assembly Member Boff.
Second, reserve my right.
Are there any other speakers on this motion? Want to return, Assembly Member Boff?
No, thank you.
Those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Now motion in the name of Assembly Member Eshalomi.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure, like me, a lot of you were shocked and sad to see the news reports on New Year's Day of the fire at the Shoreguard Centre in Croydon. The sheer intensity of that fire required 125 firefighters and over 20 appliances, and they didn't actually bring that fire into control until the next day, a good 24 hours. Now, these storage centres are used by many different people in several different ways. Some families use them to store their possessions, when they're going through difficult times like homelessness, being rehoused, family breakups, unemployments. You may have seen the story of the Ullah Khan family who were evicted and placed in temporary accommodation, and their family had no choice but to use the Shoreguard Storage Centre to store a number of their possessions. The family used to visit that site every 2 weeks so that they could get a change of clothes and the children could change their toys. Imagine how they now feel having lost everything which they possess. A number of businesses in Croydon also use that Shoreguard Centre to keep some of their stock. Again, a number of businesses are now facing potential wipeout. This is something that's close to my heart because the block of flats that I live in will be decanted later this year because there's building works going on. And like many of the families living in my block, we may have to use a storage centre. As you can imagine the thought of all our possessions going in there, and if there isn't that safe regulations, what could happen to those to our possessions? This fire demonstrated that there isn't enough regulation in this area, and we do need to look at why and how we can improve on this. The fact that a number of these storage centres are accessed 24 hours a day, but yet there are no sprinklers there, should set alarm bells ringing. A number of the companies responsible for these centres, the insurance that they give out is simply not adequate to people who have now lost a number of their goods. 1,198 units were rented out in that Shoreguard Centre in Croydon. And the police, yes, they did launch a criminal investigation to try and find out the real cause behind the fire. But they've now dropped this investigation just yesterday, announcing that because the sheer extent and the damage of the fire, it's impossible to establish the cause of the fire. So what are all these families and businesses going to do? The response from Shoreguard has been inadequate. Rightfully so, the Mayor's called for a review, and the local MP, and I know that my colleague, Assemblymember Connor as well, have been putting a lot of pressure on Shoreguard But I hope that you'll support this motion, say actually we need that urgent review and we need a tighter regulation so we don't see more centres like this going up in flames and families and businesses left with nothing. Thank you.
Assembly Member O'Connell.
Well, I formally second at the moment, Chair.
Anybody want to speak on this matter?
I just say, if you, in that case, just very much support this. I mean, this is the local with the national context. In my constituency, Purley One, I'm really delighted that Florence has brought this. So it had a devastating effect on many people that we've heard. And we've also heard quite rightly that many people use these facilities not as a kind of luxury interim need, but an absolute necessity. And we've heard that. And it's emerged that there's no sprinklers, there's no compartmentalisation, that's a word, no itineraries, no staff to raise alarm later in the day. Whole basic lack of security around that, causing immense problems and distress for those families. So this is one incident, one local incident, significant in of itself, but we've heard that the growth in that industry across the UK is significant. I certainly support a call for review in the regulation processes if in fact the outcome of that is that we can make sure that something like this, fires do happen, but make sure that the effect on the families can somehow be limited to the distress that we've heard from people in Croydon and elsewhere. So again, I second this motion.
Thank you very much. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? Another unanimous motion. Motion in the name of Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. I stand to talk about FGM yet again, and I must say that everybody in this chamber brings it up, is sympathetic to the cause. For anybody watching, 137,000 women in the UK are thought to have had this procedure done, which is absolutely shocking. And they assess that 23,000 girls under 15 are at risk. It is absolutely our duty and anybody else's duty to highlight this and to look to seek to ways to stop it. One of the worst things about this is that people think it's a religious thing. It absolutely isn't. I know I'm talking to the converted. I know you all know. But too many people out there don't know. They think it's a religious thing. It's a cultural thing. And we have got to get into those communities that think that this is totally acceptable, because it is not acceptable. It is child abuse. It's nothing short of child abuse. I'm thrilled that somebody was actually charged last week. I haven't seen the sentencing. I hope it's long, quite frankly, because we need to send the messages to these communities that it's illegal in this country, and I think it has been since 1985, and that they will be found and they will be prosecuted. But of course, the really strong thing that we've got to do is to send strong messages to the elders, etc., in those communities to explain just why it's so wrong. How mothers and grandmothers who often oversee this allow or even put it forward for their daughters and granddaughters to have this done is absolutely abhorrent to me, being the mother of a daughter. I find it incredible. And I know all of you around this table do as well. Therefore, I would support this motion, obviously.
Thank you. Assembly Member Shah.
Thank you, Chair. This is another of those motions this morning where Assembly is speaking with one voice. And I'd like to thank Assembly Member Hall for bringing this to the forum. This is a very, very timely motion, as we have just seen the landmark first conviction for FGM in this country. And interesting, I have a quote speaking on this Old Bailey verdict. Ms. Nimco Ali, a British Somali activist, said, and I quote, "It has taken 34 years for us to secure a successful conviction, but now that we have, I know things will change. Those within communities such as mine who thought police were too scared to act now know that this is not the case. Young people are joining the cause to ensure everyone knows that we all have a role to play in the fight against FGM. Chair, there's a sense that real change is coming. And I do sincerely hope that the first conviction will lead to further convictions for those who carry out this hideous crime and eventually lead London to become a real zero-cutting city. I do want to bring about to this debate a couple of good practices here. The Let's Protect Our Girls campaign, which is referred to in the motion, does excellent amount of work in raising awareness of FGM and its lifelong consequences on women across the country. It brings attention to the brilliant work of the NSPCC in this area. I also want to commend the work of the MOPEC FGM early intervention model that was piloted across 5 boroughs in London. The FGM clinic set up under this pilot scheme brought a holistic approach combining health, social care, and therapeutic services, working together with community organizations, which I think is important that we have a real partnership and work with communities that are affected and communities who are part of diverse London. I understand that women who've been referred to these clinics reported that the benefits of attending are considerable as they have gained knowledge and understanding about their own experience with FGM, as well as understanding of how to protect their children from it. I hope that this scheme will help shape our future approach to tackling FGM in London. Another good practice example, another important part of ensuring London is a zero-cutting city is to educate about FGM and its dangers. I commend Norbury School in Harrow for their pioneering work in this area. They raise awareness of FGM amongst children and families and also work to spot signs of possible FGM in children and work to safeguard them. They deliver specific FGM awareness lessons to children aged 7 and above and promote the NSPCC's PANTS campaign to all pupils across the school. Norbury has quite rightly gained a fantastic reputation as leaders in this field, and their acknowledged work is appreciated both at City Hall and also in House of Commons. However, there are some major challenges as Norbury School has faced. For example, those challenges include encouraging other schools to adopt a similar approach. Not all schools are currently willing to take on the task of tackling FGM at this crucial early point. The lack of guidance and strategic approach from local authorities and lack of funding, which I think is critical because it means work to tackle FGM is not possible for already overstretched resources of schools and their budgets. Funding for Norbury School to continue the work is desperately needed, and hope that Mayor will assist. I do sincerely hope, finally, that we can see the MOPEC scheme expanded into other boroughs, particularly in Brent and Harrow, where we have some of the highest recorded figures of FGM in the country. Finally, I commend the work of Assembly Member Arnold, who has been sort of promoting this issue and work untiringly for a number of years. Let us grab the sense of change and work together to eradicate FGM. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Will members please agree in accordance with standing order that we extend the meeting in order to finish the business?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Whittle.
Mr. Chairman, definitely would like to support Susan's motion, Assembly Member Hall's motion. It is more, I would say, than child abuse. It's grievous bodily harm, actually. I do know a fair amount about the subject, having commissioned a report on it about 6 years ago, when long before in the Assembly. At that time, the government was still working on these figures, which were about 10, 15 years old, something like 10,000 girls. And we found out that it was much nearer to your figure. I think motions like this are terribly important. who could possibly not agree with them. But the point is that we've had one conviction, one, in 30 years. 30 years. It's not a question of being complacent. Let's not even congratulate ourselves on that. That is simply appalling. The only way that you will send a real message is not through education, with respect, Naveen, because we've tried that for years and years and years, and that's the kind of softy approach. Nothing sends a message like a prosecution, I'm afraid. And the fact is, this was made against the law in 1985, very specifically, in the FGEM Act. And I think that, as we've seen with other sort of issues in our society, why has it been 30 years? And I think one of the reasons has to be a kind of misplaced cultural sensitivity. You said that it's not a religious act, it's a cultural act. That might be true. You say that, but then even so what if it were a religious act? It's still wrong. I'm sorry. It's wrong, right? So we have to look. It's worth thinking about when I talk about cultural sensitivity, a misplaced sense of it, not wanting to offend, which is a lot of this when it comes to the public services, the police, social workers, or whatever. I'd like to just draw your attention to something that Germaine Greer said in quite some time ago now. That's right. She said that basically going after FGM was an attack on cultural identity. And that's the kind of attitude that means we don't get prosecutions. So I support it. But this is got to be treated with the seriousness with which we should be treating it. Thank you very much.
Okay, those in favour of the motion, please show. Do you want to sum up? Oh, I'm sorry. Assemblymember Desai.
Just very quickly, nothing succeeds like a prosecution, and last week I met the detective superintendent, whose name escapes me, who was specifically put in charge of the successful prosecution by the commissioner, and he has a specialist unit. The jury was still out, but he was confident that they would come back with a conviction, and thankfully he was proved right. Good laws become discredited if they're not enforced, and as Assemblymember Whittle said, nothing succeeds like a prosecution. He assured both myself and Assemblymember Arnold, who Assemblymember Navin has quite rightly pointed out has done some fantastic work in this area. And still on the police committee, we've been taking this issue very seriously, that there are more investigations in the pipeline, and that this is something that they will be pursuing. So I just want to put that on record. Thank you.
Any other speakers before I ask Assemblymember Hall to sum up? Okay, Assemblymember Hall.
I think it's all been said, Chairman.
Okay,
Thank
you very much. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Thank you. Unanimous. We now have another motion in the name of Assemblymember Hall on hepatitis C.
Thank you, Chairman. Hepatitis C we have discussed in the Assembly before, but it's another situation where we must keep this live to all members because we all need to be talking about it. There are estimated to be over 40,000 people living with hepatitis C just in London, about the same amount of people that are suffering from HIV. Therefore, it is a major public health that we must be looking at. It affects also the most vulnerable in society, including people that use drugs, the homeless, people in prison. And therefore, it's something that very often these people haven't got a voice. We need to have that voice for them. I particularly asked the Mayor to put it in the Health Inequalities Strategy, as you will know from being in the Chamber when I challenged him on it, and it wasn't. But I have good news in as much as the Mayor and his team are now sitting up and paying attention and are really helping. And the Hepatitis C Association are very happy about that, as so they should be. Just one little piece of information with this. In days gone by, sufferers used to have to have injections and tablets and everything else. Now they can just have a tablet, so it's so much easier. We really could eradicate this in London, and we must do all we can to let people know about the cures for this terrible disease. Thank you.
Assemblymember Sahota.
Thank you, Chair. Hepatitis C is a grave problem in London. The diagnosis in 2015, in the most recent survey taken, was 31% higher than 2013. And in the UK, 30% of all hepatitis C patients are here in the capital. We know that this disease disproportionately affects the minority groups, gay, bisexual men, prisoners, and people of South Asian origin are particularly at risk. Importantly, hepatitis C sufferers are not aware that they have the virus, and meaning that they don't seek treatment early enough when their health is not as seriously risked at the beginning of the illness. So testing is important, raising awareness is important, and that there are treatments available now. Hepatitis C is curable nowadays. I also like to take this opportunity to commend the Mayor on the work that he has done already to highlight the issue, showing his support for the World Health Organization's goal to eliminate hepatitis C by 2030, and committing to working with Public Health England and London Joint Working Group on hepatitis C to raise awareness, share good practice and show support. So having a mayor who's already proactive in this area is helpful, and he's already addressing the issues. But there's two things I want to address. A, hepatitis C is curable, but it's also preventable. And prevention needs raising public awareness, picking cases up early, warning them early, treating them early so they can't spread it. And that means expenditure on public health budgets. And where have the cuts taken place in the NHS? It's on public health. £110 million have been taken out of public health from 2015 to 2021. A 3.6% cut year on in public health budgets to local authorities. So local authorities don't have the money now to do the public health work they need to. Sexual health clinics are closing down because they are not being properly funded. So I think it's important that the Mayor raises these issues, but it's also very important that the government reinstates the public health budgets. If you look at the 10-year forward plan, it talks very much about putting prevention ahead of treatment. And I think no one can argue with that. But you can't prevent illnesses if you cut the public health funding. So I'm delighted to support this motion because I think it's a sensible motion, but I also want to make a plea that public health budgets should be reinstated, and also let me tell you what the fragmentation of care is. The public health sits with the local authorities, the commissioning for health service screening sits with local authorities, but the treatment for hepatitis C sits with the NHS. So we have a fragmented system, a reduction in public health spending, and a mayor who we asking to do something about this. But I hope the mayor will carry on working, the mayor will support this action, but I think I also want to make sure that we have enough funding in the public health. So I'm happy to support this, but I want to just raise those concerns also.
Any other speakers on this matter? Assembly Member Hall.
I think I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Unanimous. Now motion in the name of Assembly Member O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm conscious of time, but this is an important issue that I wanted to raise. And a big shout out initially to Battersea Dogs and Cats. This is around their pet-friendly properties report. I had the opportunity, supported by Tom, to launch this report upstairs. First of all, I want to detail my view around the benefits of pet ownership and why we're talking about this. And I think this is about the support that it gives for many people. I'll give you a story going back in time of a gentleman in his 80s, lived in a council house. He had a loving family around him. He had a son that wasn't around a great deal, but he had a Jack Russell that he used, an old Jack Russell, used to sit on his lap night after night. And that gentleman, with the onset of dementia, had fantastic support around that. That old boy is my dad, and I was a tenant in Lewisham Council at that time. There's clear health benefits. There's clear physical and mental benefits. It socialises people. There's less isolation if you're a pet owner. And it gives families and young people a respect for animals. That's why it's important, I believe, that all people, whatever the tenure, should have the opportunity to have pets. This motion, however, is aimed specifically at social housing providers, and I think that's an important point. Battersea's report points out that they have inconsistent policies. Some ban, some don't. So there's all sorts of conditions around that. There's little support for those that are dog owners, and the main time that the councils get involved is when they sanction them and eject them or ask them to get rid of their animals, and 200 last year themselves went to Battersea. 200 dogs went to Battersea as a result of them being ejected from their families' homes. So this is not talking about a blanket imposition of telling housing providers, be it councils, be it housing associations, that they must accept animals for their tenancies, but it's to ask for flexible policies with a presumption for, but with a standalone tenancy document sitting alongside their tenancy agreement, setting out the standards that are expected of those residents wishing to keep a pet. A consistent approach, and understanding, because sometimes there's a no pets clause, and we need to really understand that. I strongly believe, partly because of my background, that social rented families should have the opportunity to have a pet. And we talked about these delightful young people earlier, and I think it's important that young people should have the opportunity to have a pet when they're younger, to give them that respect for animals. So I think this is a motion that I would like the Assembly to support. I think it has benefit, and I look forward to the support of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Copley.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Assembly Member O'Connell for bringing this motion and for hosting Battersea Cats and Dogs in the living room at the event that I attended. And it was good to see the Deputy Mayor for Housing also attended and is supporting this campaign. I do feel very strongly about tenants being allowed to keep pets, partly because I would quite like to get a cat and I'm not allowed to. Now, I'm a private tenant, and as Steve has said, this motion relates to social landlords, but I do think that we need a more sensible approach across the board when it comes to renting and allowing pets, and indeed for leaseholders as well, because we have to remember that a lot of leaseholders are also denied pets as part of their leasehold agreements as well. And there is really, the sort of human side of this is really tragic. The Battersea report has found that 10% of people who have to give up a dog do so because they move and their new landlord won't allow them to keep the dog. And just thinking, as someone who grew up with animals, the heartbreak and the distress of having to give up a much-loved pet just because you move. And there are huge mental health benefits to pets as well. We all know that pets bring many people great joy, but there's a great cost saving to the NHS. £2.5 billion a year could be saved from mental health spending. If £2.5 billion is saved from mental health spending because of pet ownerships, because of that joy that pets bring. Now, of course, pet ownership is not a substitute for adequately funding NHS services, but it does help, particularly at these times of constrained spending. And I really do welcome as well the emphasis on responsible pet ownership in this report. And the example was given of the work that Battersea are doing with Phoenix Community Housing down in Lewisham. They're working with Phoenix. Phoenix have got rid of their blanket. They don't have a blanket no pets policy, but Battersea provide microchipping and they provide advice on responsible pet ownership. Because of course we do have to recognise that irresponsible pet owners do cause antisocial behaviour, but I think we need a more common sense approach to dealing with that, rather than just tarnishing everybody with the same brush and having some sort of blanket ban. I'm pleased as well that the Labour Party's policy nationally is for a default right to pets, which would bring us in line with countries like Belgium and Italy. But as I say, this motion does specifically relate to social housing providers, and I hope that we can get unanimous support of it in the Chamber today.
Assembly Member Boff.
I'm just going to use this opportunity to get something off my chest, actually. It's a guilt that I've borne for many, many years. It was when I opened the bread bin when I used to live in Hackney, just off Broadway Market, and I opened the bread bin and there was a mouse staring back at me. I finally acceded to the demands of my husband, who always wanted to get cats. And he said, you can't just get one cat, you've got to get two so they can have company for each other.
It's true.
So eventually we did, and I asked my landlord whether or not, and it was a long fought battle, asked my landlord whether or not we could get some, have cats. And they said, I've still got the written reply at home, and they said, yes, you can have a pet, but you can just have one cat. Well, I didn't want to split Colin and not Colin up. And so what I had to do is I fibbed to them. And this is where I have to come clean. I actually did fib to the landlord and said we had one. And I was safe on the basis that apart from me and the other half, nobody can tell the difference between Colin and not Colin. They're both black cats. But all I can say is that the joy they bring to you, the joy that cats bring to you, and a complete annoyance, because of course once you have a cat you realise that your entire household only exists for the purposes of keeping those cats happy. But the joy it brings to people is so intense that I kind of overrided my original reticence to support this motion, because I don't like telling landlords to do things all over London. Perhaps I'm just wavering. Perhaps it's the effect of pet ownership has softened me in later years. But I wholeheartedly want to support this motion, as do Colin and not Colin. Thank you very much.
Well, have you supported rent control yet, Andrew?
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers on this? Okay, Assembly Member O'Connell.
No, fine.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Unanimity again. Item 8. Future meetings of the Assembly. Can I ask that you agree to use the 7th of March plenary to hold a question and answer session with Nick Hurd, the Minister for London? Thank you. And the date of the next meeting is scheduled to be Mayor's Question Time on Monday, 25th of February at 10 a.m. There is no urgent business.